Hey, thank you so much for clicking on this video. My name is Kaylee, and this is Read, Rant, Review, where, you guessed it, I read a bunch of crazy books, and then I tell you all about them. Today, we are going to be talking about the book Ask for Andrea by Noelle Ely. This book was published in 2022, has 295 pages, and currently on Goodreads, it's sitting at a 4.07 with nearly 300,000 ratings. So pretty freaking good. I think this is one of the more highly rated books that we've covered here recently. If you're unfamiliar with what this book is, I'll go ahead and read you the book description. I'll give you a little disclaimer, and then we'll dive right in. Megan, Brescia, and Sky have just one thing in common. They were all murdered by the same man. He hunted them online, masquerading as an eligible bachelor. Then he played the perfect gentleman, a thick layer of charm and a 1,000-watt smile, hiding the fact that his first dates end in shallow graves. He's gotten away with murder 3 times now. The only thing that might keep him from killing again? The women he murdered. Megan, Brescia, and Sky might be dead, but they're not gone. They've found each other, and they won't rest until they find a way to stop him. The haunt is on. So yeah, pretty dark book. All 3 of these women are murdered, and then their ghostly versions of themselves band together to get rid of the serial killer. I think that's really cool. I think that's a very interesting premise. I currently, truth be told, am on chapter 6 of this book as I'm going into this. So I'm going to tell you the book up to where I am. I'm going to give you a beat by beat, chapter by chapter breakdown up until this point. I'll read a chunk, I'll touch back in, and we'll experience this book together. I have started doing that a lot more recently, especially with these thriller and mystery books, because it gives me an opportunity to make some guesses along the way with you and kind of like experience it more. If that makes sense, I don't know. I think it's a little bit more fun to do it this way. So we've done it the last couple of times. We'll do it again. I'm excited. So far, so good. We'll see what you think, though. So before I get into this and give you a chapter by chapter, beat by beat breakdown, like I said, I do just want to give the disclaimer that, hey man, you heard what this book is about. It's pretty graphic, it's pretty gory, it's pretty violent. So heads up on that. I'll skim over quite a bit of it in this retelling, but if you choose to go and read this on your own, just be aware of that. And just in general for this video, viewer discretion is advised. And then I only have one rule on my channel. If you've been here for a while, say it with me. Don't make it weird. Okay? Whatever you think that means, it means that and more. Don't leave weird comments. If you're the author, friends, fans, family, stans, anything of the like of the author, this review is not for you. This review is for my fellow readers. Hey guys, I have one more thing before we get into the video. I just want to say thank you so much for your patience. I have been traveling so much for my 9-to-5 lately. As you can tell, I am in yet another hotel room. And so my posting has been a little off. Like I'm still posting on Thursdays and stuff, but I haven't posted any Monday videos. I've done some polls and I haven't gotten around to doing those. Life's just been a little chaotic, you know. I'm either like spending a week prepping for my work trip, on the trip, or the week recovering. And so I haven't really had time to post videos and do the things that I want to do on this channel. I've barely even had time to take care of myself. But thanks to the sponsor of today's video, ZocDoc, they have made that so incredibly easy. Between all the traveling and my general procrastination and just exhaustion after getting back, it has been so hard for me to make a doctor's appointment, like my annual physicals and just the normal stuff that I need to be doing. And so ZocDoc, though, has made that incredibly easy with their free-to-use online interface. I can go on there, put in my insurance, I see all the doctors in my area, and it's incredibly easy to book. Like you can literally see available appointments and just book it with one click. They are really, like, ZocDoc is making it easier than ever to prioritize your health. So please, 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 if there is an appointment that you're putting off, if you have not been going to your annual appointments, if you have a cervix, please, for the love of God, schedule an OBGYN appointment and get your preventative exams done. I cannot emphasize enough to you how critically important that is. Click the link in the description box below or head to ZocDoc.com/readrantreview to get started and check that appointment off of your to-do list. Thank you so much for sponsoring this video, ZocDoc. Let's get back to the video. Chapter 1 opens from Megan's perspective. She lives out in Utah, and this is 1 year before our current timeline. I would love for one time in my life to read a thriller/mystery novel that does not have multiple timelines. Please, for the love of God, if you have a recommendation, give it to me, because I feel like absolutely every single one, we're like jumping timelines. And I know it's, it's for the thrill of it and the whatever of the story and the whatever of it all. But it honestly is just starting to piss me off. And I think it's because I've seen so many piss poor ones done lately, or like it's just used as an excuse to, I don't know, blindside the reader instead of tell an actual story in like a coherent way. I don't think that'll be the case here. But I had to say that out loud because it done pissed me off seeing it immediately, So if you're new to the channel, I like to put up the names on the side of the screen over here, since we will have multiple narrators, right? We're going to have Megan, Brescia, and Sky. So I'll have their names up on the screen, a little bit of maybe some information about them and anybody else that we come across the way, just to make it a little bit easier to understand because it does get a little jumbly. So chapter 1, Megan. In Utah. She's in her 20s and she goes on a date with a guy named Jimmy. She refers to him to her friends as Needle, as in being the needle in the haystack. He is quite a gentleman. He looks like Chris Hemsworth. I am actually going to look up how many times Chris Hemsworth is said, because it's been at least 4 since I've read it. And those are the 4 times that it's mentioned. Okay. The last couple times I've done that, I have been unpleasantly surprised with the amount of words being repeated. So that's great, actually. So there's Chris Hemsworth, beautiful man. He's got a mole on his cheek. It's pretty identifiable. But all in all, he's a cute guy and he's really surprising. And she was trying to, kind of tamp down her expectations as she went on this date and met him at the bar. But he lived up to it. He's a really cool guy. The one thing to note, and that she kind of notes, is that he orders a ginger ale at the bar, which is fine. They're in Utah. Maybe he just doesn't drink alcohol. But she has a drink, and she's loosening up, and she's having a good time on the date, and it's getting better and better, and she's feeling more and more relaxed. And at the end, when he offers to give her a ride home, she says yes, of course, like that sounds awesome, passes out, and then wakes up being strangled by this man. She dies. She is like having an out-of-body experience, and it's pretty graphic. It's pretty bad. So she tries to run away. He goes back to his car. She's running away. Her body is just left behind in the woods. And then as she's sprinting away, she hears a woman calling her name, but she just keeps running because she's afraid. Okay, wow, hell of a way to open this. In chapter 2, Brescia's point of view, she's in Boulder, Colorado, 2 years before. I first realized I was dead the same way you realize you've been dreaming, except backwards, I guess, because the bad dream was real. And so she's having that same out-of-body experience, but this time she is watching Jimmy, as he finishes, killing her. Okay. Pretty horrific. We go on to learn a little bit more about their relationship. They met on a dating app called Match Strike. It's the same dating app that Megan had met him on and was like dating him off of. Match Strike, I'm just like a play on words, I guess, for Tinder. And they met on there. They dated for a week a year ago. He got way too controlling, way too fast. And so she broke it off with him. And he started sending a whole bunch of like crazy text messages to her, to the point where she had to block his number and then reported his profile because he was just being very, very aggressive. And then she blocked him, moved on with her life, hanging out. A year later, is just outside taking the trash out, and he just comes from around the corner and just strangles her with an extension cord that she had outside. So she decides immediately, and I love this so much about her, she's going to follow him. She will repay the favor. And her chapter ends with, "An hour ago, he had taken everything I had. I didn't know how, but I planned to return the favor." So when he scurries away, right, they're in her backyard, like inside of the fence of the backyard. Nobody knew. She lived by herself. She only had a cat named Frank. Nobody is going to report her missing until she doesn't show up to work the next day. And so it's like a pretty, I don't know, he's going to get away with it type of crime, right? So side of her house, sneaks out the back, goes down a couple blocks to where he had his car parked, and she, in her ghost form, is just following right along. When he gets into his car, she dives into the car as well, and then takes a ride with him as he goes home. The one thing to note is her ghostly figure, like herself, her current being, she kind of refers to as like a mirage or like a mirrored version of herself. And she can see her hands. It's all there. She like walks and it's like her normal, way that she would move her body, but she doesn't feel anything. And her feet don't really touch the ground. It's like everything's just like a little bit off of the surface. And she can touch people or touch things. Like it's not like her hand goes through things, but nobody notices, right? Like she tries to grab his shoulder. He doesn't respond. She tries to blow on a leaf and it moves like imperceptibly. As she's following him to his car, there's a guy walking by with a dog and she starts yelling and the dog looks up, but not the guy who's walking the animal. So there's like little bits and pieces here of what it means to be a ghost in this like particular story. Kind of interesting stuff. So she hops in his car as he drives home. Gets there. Goes inside. It's a different house than the one that he had described to her before, of the apartment that he lived in. But she goes there. There's a bunch of Barbie dolls outside. There's a minivan in the garage. He has kids. He has a whole family. So like I said, she can't go into the house, right? He was able to get in the house before she was, but she sees like the fence in the backyard. There's like little holes right between the fence posts, and she can imagine herself in that air, and so then she can get through the fence post. Or for the garage, there's a cat door, and so it's cracked open, and so she can like kind of will herself through the crack of this door, but she can't phase through the walls. I hope that makes sense. So she's in the garage. This is where she's witnessing this minivan. This is where she's hearing the voices of his 2 daughters and his wife. This guy has a whole ass family and he's out murdering folks. She's hearing all these things, getting very, very frustrated that he did this, understandably, and that he has a whole family, right? So she's spiraling a little bit, but what really pushes her over the edge is seeing their cat, because she thinks of her cat, Frank, and how she's never going to be able to pet him again, and how he's just going to be like clawing at the back door because she didn't come in and feed him that night. And I'm crying. What the hell? So she starts to cry, but she can't cry because she can't produce tears anymore. So instead, the light that was on in the garage pops. So very strong emotions trigger at least some type of like electrical field response. So the lights pop, and then her chapter ends. Obviously, she realizes like, I think I just did that. Interesting. We go into chapter 3. We meet Sky. She's from Idaho, and this is now. So this is like current timeline. She is a teenage girl, recently graduated high school, about to go off to college, works at a coffee shop. There's a real handsome guy, kept coming into the coffee shop all the time, never ordered coffee. He only ever ordered hot chocolate, which was cute and like quirky and unique enough that she remembered his order. And he's definitely in his late 20s and like way too old for her, but he's just so handsome, and she's had this crush on him all summer that she's, continually served him. On the very last day of her job, the whole time, her coworker, by the way, is like kind of pressuring her. He's like, just give him your number, you're freaking ogling each other, little googly eyes, just give him your number. She doesn't. She chickens out. She gets nervous. She's like, I'm going to do it for college. Like when I get to college, I'm going to step out of my shell, It's really freaking sad. Very, very tragic reading this chapter. Looking forward to the future. So, final day at the work. She's literally leaving for college the next day or the next week or whatever. He comes in. It's the first time she's seen him in like a little while. And she's like, oh my God, this is like, what good timing. Yeah, this is my last day. So I wanted to say bye and blah, blah, blah. And he looks really, really disappointed, but they don't exchange numbers again, right? She chickens out. 2 hours later, she goes to leave, and he's out in the parking lot, and he says, hey, you want to ride? You want to go get some food or something? Like, we should hang out. She says, oh my God, yeah, of course. Like, this is perfect. And she's so incredibly excited. And once she's in the car, he's like, hey, I know a place. Let me just drive you there. Yeah. In her mind, right, her gut feeling, there's some alarm bells. Why was he still in the parking lot 2 hours later? Why are we driving away from the strip where all the food is? Why are we getting on the highway? Okay, well, maybe he's going to, Boise is like, 30 minutes away, and there's a lot more food down there. Maybe that's where he's going. And he takes another exit for like this like weird back roads off-road area, and she's like really starting to feel bad. And she's like, hey, is that the right exit? And he's like, oh, you've never been to Moe's? Yeah, Moe's is so good. Like, you've lived here your whole life and you've never been? She's like, yeah. And she starts to feel better. right? She's really flip-flopping of like whether or not to trust her gut. And she's going to text her mom about going to Moe's. But when she pulls out her phone, there's no service. And he's like, oh, yeah, don't worry. Like, if you're trying to text your mom or something, just like, when we go over the next hill, you'll get service again. Awesome, thank you. She's like, again, flip-flopping. Because every time that she has a concern, he somehow counters it absolutely perfect. They get up to the hill, checks her phone. There's no service. He's like, oh, yeah, if you go down there by the creek, though, you get service really good. Yeah, I found that out the hard way when one of my buddies had to take a pee break once. So, cool, thank you. She goes down by the creek. Obviously, she does not get the text message out, and he strangles and murders her. And after he does, he immediately leaves, goes in his car, and drives away. And she is just sitting there. This was actually like also a very horrifically sad moment where she just keeps waiting by her body. And she's like, okay, well, like, I'll wake up, right? Like, I have to come to. I've watched this on all those like TV shows of these like near deaths, like you have an out of body experience. So like, I'll end up in my body in a second. Like, come on, like, wake up, body. Like, let's figure it out. And she like lays down next to herself, just like waiting to wake back up in the right body. Doesn't happen, obviously. In chapter 4, we go back to Megan. She was the one in the woods from chapter 1, and she's going around. She ran far enough, and then she decides to go back to her body to at least go there because she has no idea where she's going or what's going on. And as she goes back, she hears coyotes, and the coyotes have begun eating her body. So she, in her ghost form, she chases them off, scares them off and whatnot. They respond to her, like they at least kind of acknowledge her existence and get scared of her when she's yelling at them. But also it's very obviously like they're not fully registering like her there. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just the weird, I don't know, not physical planes. What am I trying to think of? Like, it's just like, I guess like planes of existence or whatever, where it's like they sense something, but not the entirety of her. Why? Maybe I'm going to stop talking. You are picking up what I'm putting down, and that's all that matters. And she decides to just sit next to her body and kind of keep a watch over it so no other animals or anything comes and like bothers it. We go into chapter 5. Brescia, like we said, she's the one that's straight up stalking this dude and haunting him because she's like, I will get back at him actually. So she is like fully ingratiated in his home. She's just like watching everybody going about their day. We learn that he has 2 young daughters named Emma and Kimmy, and his wife April. I'll have the names up on here. I don't know. I'm assuming their names will come up, right? I think this is probably the full cast of characters is probably just the 6 of these folks, 7 of these folks. So I'll have all the names up here, but just so you're tracking. He's a full family. Turns out he wasn't completely lying. Like, yeah, he lied about his last name, but Jimmy is his name because his name is James. James Carson, and he's a computer programmer, and he works at home. He works in like his home office in the basement. And so because of that, he has all the time in the world to be locked away in the basement, hitting up all these women. And so she's watching as he goes onto his like incognito browser and pulls up Match Strike and goes and like flirts with all these women. And he has like this like roster of 4 of them, but he very clearly has a favorite one that he's consistently messaging and like really putting some time and effort into. And it's just hard to watch. And then after he's done doing that, he pulls up another incognito thing and he looks up her name. He's like, Brescia Jones murder, Brescia Jones missing, blah, blah, blah. Finds the report of her murder. And it's very obvious in the article, right? She's reading it over his shoulder. They have no leads whatsoever. Absolutely no idea. Because like we said, they dated for a week a year ago. Why would you think that would happen? Why would like her friends and family, why would any of them think about that one weird guy that she might have maybe mentioned once or twice a year ago that he would come back around? The thing to note as well with that is like he had grown out his beard like super scraggly crazy when he had murdered her. He was like completely clean shaven when they dated. He was scraggly when he killed her, and then he shaved it off like the next day to try to be like more unrecognizable or something. So just, I don't know if it's important. I'm just saying it to you because that's what I know, right? So they have no leads. They have nothing. And it's very frustrating to her because she just wants him brought to justice. And as she's watching him flirt with more and more women on Match Strike, she's realizing like these women are going to die. Like I have to stop him. I have to do something. Like this just really freaking sucks. Like this whole situation just sucks. And this is confirmed, maybe cemented exacerbated, pick a word, because he sets up a date with one of these women. They're going to go on their date that night, and he and his family are moving out of town the next day. So that is very scary, because he could just murder another woman and then just disappear and get away with it. Keeping in mind, he literally just killed Brescia. It has not been that long at all. So this guy, his cooldown time is freaking scary, scary. I will just read you this one part. He was the kind of beautiful that drew you in before you even considered the fact that beautiful things can be poisonous. As he read her response, his lips turned up in the barest smile, which disappeared as the sound of little footsteps clattered across the office ceiling, accompanied by shrieks of laughter. The anger that had been simmering inside me for the past 3 days bubbled into something white hot as I watched him close the incognito browser and put in headphones. If I still had a body, it would have been shaking. Since I didn't, the whole world sort of turned fuzzy and charged. That's when I heard a quiet pop and his computer screen went dark. He pulled the headphones out of the computer jack and flung them onto the desk in annoyance, as if they were the cause of the problem. I stared at the dark computer screen as the fizzy feeling disappeared. It was replaced by something like hope. Had I done that? Computers frizzed out all the time. So did light bulbs. It might have been a coincidence, but I didn't think so. Okay, I know. Hey, I know you literally just told me the last time that I heard from you, Brescia. I really don't want to hear it again. Don't start being repetitive on me. Don't start doing that to me, Miss Author. But yeah, so literally only 3 days before he's already arranging another date with somebody. That is not good. That is such a fast turnaround. There's no way it was only these 3 women, right? That's escalating so quickly, especially because if they were all a year apart, you know what I mean? 2 years, 1 year, this one. Yikes. Yikes. And then in chapter 6, we go back to Sky, and I'm crying. So she stayed with her body. Eventually, her cell phone that she had with her, it was still in her pocket and on and everything. It was still pinging off the towers, even though she didn't have reception or something. And so eventually they were able to find her body. The cops were, or the police were. And it's not like she was really hard to find anyway. She was just out in the open. That's the thing about this guy, too. He just kills them and runs off. He doesn't try to hide the bodies. He doesn't do anything. He doesn't take a souvenir. There's nothing. He just kills him and runs off. So no different with her. I mean, hey, don't get me wrong. I made a face in case you're listening. In case you're only listening to this, I made a face to that. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to read about some horrific way that what he does to these bodies and these women and their whatever. Okay. I'm not saying I want to read something sick and disgusting. I'm just saying I'm very surprised by that, given all of the, true crime and everything that I used to read and all the crime shows and stuff that I used to watch. It's just kind of a surprising reaction from him. Regardless, Sky spends a few days with her body. Nobody comes, right? They're kind of out in the middle of nowhere in this relatively obscure area. So after a while, she gives up and she decides to at least go home, try to see her mom. And she finds her mom, and her mom is grinding her teeth and making a noise and very obviously having a nightmare. And so she sits on the bed next to her mom. She says, "It's okay, Mom. It's okay. Don't be sad. I'm still here." So then the noise stopped. The idea that maybe some part of her could hear me made the despair well up until it was so big it felt like I was made of it. "Don't be sad, I'm still here. Can you hear me?" She jolted upward in the bed with a scream, knocking the glass of water off my nightstand as she fumbled for her phone. Oh, she was sleeping in her daughter's bed? I didn't even realize that. Off my nightstand as she fumbled for her phone. I leaped up off the bed and moved into the corner of the room where I stood frozen. She stared at the blue glow of her cell phone for a few seconds, her face still tightly crumpled. Then she set the phone carefully back on the nightstand and lay back down on my bed, mumbling something in Spanish. I took a few steps closer to the bed. "Mom?" She stared at the ceiling for a few minutes, even when I leaned in close enough to see the freckles on her wet cheeks. Then I sat down where I was, letting myself sink to the carpet as I listened to her snuffling sobs until she finally turned off the light. Growing up, I didn't get noticed much. To be honest, I preferred it that way. I was the quiet Latina girl who never raised her hand in class, the one who avoided eye contact at all costs on the bus. I was pretty content to let people look right through me. She was the one exception. Not anymore. Okay. That is rude. Don't make me cry. It's a good sign that I'm crying. It's a good sign of the writing and of the investment that I have for this freaking young woman that her life ended before it could even begin, right? In that regard, so far in the book, hey, obviously, emotionally at least, I'm locked in right now. However, grammatically, that last paragraph was a fucking atrocity. I was pretty content to let people look right through me. She was the one exception, not anymore. So the phrasing on that makes it sound like she was content. Hold on, it makes it sound like she was okay with her mom looking through her. And then not anymore, as though her mom does not look through her anymore. I was pretty content to let people look right through me. She was the only exception, right? So she was the only one that I wanted to see me. Not anymore. Makes it sound like you're not content with that anymore. It doesn't make it sound like she doesn't see you anymore. I hope you understand what I'm saying, to where like reading it the first time, yes, emotionally punched me in the gut. Second time, I'm like, wait a second, that could have been worded a lot better, but it's fine. I'm just being picky. In chapter 7, we're back with Megan, who is still watching over her body, but by now all of the animals are getting to her, as well as the heat of the day, and she is slowly just turning into a pile of bones. She doesn't really know where to go. She doesn't really know what to do, though. So she's running around this clearing, quite literally running. She tried to fly at one point, as silly as that is. She just kind of assumed that ghosts could fly, and it didn't work. But she doesn't get tired, at least, when she runs around and jumps. She can't really like hurt herself or get tired in that way. So that's cool. She's just kind of replaying her life. And I thought about my parents, who I hadn't really been in touch with since I'd moved out on my own. I drifted through Christmas mornings, family dinners, movie nights, bike rides, and even some of the times that I'd gotten lectured about my grades or getting home late. Even those memories felt comforting. It was a good way to pass the time, but once in a while I felt myself drifting so far into the memory that it took a few seconds to reorient myself to the stark rocks and the blood-soaked ground at my feet, where my bones were scattered across the clearing. I wasn't sure what would happen if I wandered too far or let myself go into those memories too long or too completely, so I explored carefully. Exactly what she's doing. And she does walk around a little bit, though, and she realizes she's at like the end of this trail off this like little dirt path that he must have driven down, but even then he must have dragged her body like 100 yards away. And when she goes down that path, she eventually sees a sign, and it's the name of the trail, but she doesn't recognize it, and it's just not very good. One day though, she does hear a car go by. She goes like sprinting down the roads to go and find it, and she thinks maybe this will finally when she gets found, but they don't. They just stay driving on the other direction. She's way too far out of the way to ever be found. However, at this like cross point where she saw this car drive by, she looks over on the shoulder, and there is one of her shoes. One of her bloodied shoes is there. Not necessarily super out in the open, but it's there. It would be noticeable by the right person at the right time. And it's there because the crows took like particular interest of her shoes that she was wearing. I think they were a little like shiny, sparkly. And one of the crows or ravens or whatever it was had taken it. And so I'm guessing it just had left it on this rock, and that's how it got here. So there is hope yet that she will be found. When we go to Brisha in chapter 8, she is continuing to do absolutely everything in her power to make this guy's life miserable. Over the next couple of days, she like turns off his laptop continuously. He's like calling Apple support constantly, thinking maybe there's issues with the electricity at the house, but he doesn't care because they're moving out soon. They're in the midst of packing and moving. So he's like, this is just a problem for the next owners. What do I care? But eventually she's doing it enough that he gets very upset, and he ends up taking it out on one of his daughters when she comes down to ask him to read to her. He yells at her, and the daughter cries, and Brisha feels like an ass because I stopped for a while after that, filled with guilt instead of anger. Maybe it wasn't fair for me to poke the bear when the bear couldn't hurt me anymore. So that was just a very interesting sentiment. I thought that was very, very interesting. So yeah, like we said, he's literally about to move away. And so he's setting up this date with Nicole, messaging her on a match strike. And Brisha realizes or decides, or whatever you want to call it, she's like, I have to go with him. I don't think I can really stop it. All I can really do is, turn a light off or make a computer crash, but I've got to try something. I have to at least try to save this girl's life. A thing to note too is like when he goes upstairs and he's lying to his wife saying that he has to go and meet with a contractor about X, Y, and Z to cover some of his work when they move. And, you know, I guess it's like kind of under the guise, I'm assuming, none of this has been said, that his like work from home job, that's why they're moving every couple of years or every year. He's just saying he has to go be at a new thing. I don't know. If you work from home, why would you have to move? I know there's regulatory stuff, right? Of like, sometimes you have to be in a certain state to work in it, even virtually, but just seems weird. I hope that gets explained eventually of how in the world his family can justify moving so frequently. But as he goes upstairs and lying to his wife, saying he's going to go and meet with blah, 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 she's in the midst of packing and they're just having this like reminiscing cute time about how, you know, they had such good memories here. The girls were born and all this good stuff. And we'll build new memories at the new house. And Brescia initially was really, really frustrated with the wife. It was one of those like, how could you be so stupid? How could you marry this man and live with him and not see that he's a monster and not realize what he's doing? And over time, though, she's started realizing how young the wife is and how she just has no idea. She's not guilty in any of this. She's just an innocent lady who's also being manipulated and falling for the charms of this man, similar to what she did, right? Brescia fell for it too. Not for years at a time, but still. So she's starting to kind of, I don't know, feel bad, right? Her anger, I am just also assuming that she's like going through like the stages of grief, right? So now we've moved past that initial like angry part of it. But she's going to go on this date and she's going to try to save this girl's life. And before we figure out what happens with that, we go to Skye again, right, in chapter 9. And she's still with her mom, still at her mom's house. And before the sun is even up, her mom is calling the cops and doing all these things and trying to report her daughter missing and get people to take it seriously. But because she's over the age of 18 and about to go to college and do all these other things, they're not really worried about it. And they tell the mom not to worry about it. They're like, she's fine, just stop. And the fact that my phone was going straight to voicemail wasn't enough of a reason to pull in the resources that would be necessary to track me down. The paperwork for the missing persons report has been filed. The woman on the other side of the line replied patiently. That's all I can tell you for sure right now. I know how difficult it is, but an officer will be in touch as soon as possible. If you learn anything else, please keep me updated. And that's it. And as her mom is, you know, talking to other people and trying to get into her laptop, right? The mom is trying to figure out what Skye's password for her laptop would be. And she's like on the phone with Skye's father and they're talking about, you know, this and this whole situation and how tragic all of this is. She doesn't even know where to start. Right? Doesn't even know what to do. Skye is sitting there and she's like willing information to her mom, right? And she's like verbally talking to her mom and she's like, you have to ask Ken, like, right? Ask my coworker about the chocolate guy and he'll know. I told her, knowing she couldn't hear me but unable to stop myself, I was pretty sure nobody had seen me get into James's car. However, he had been in that coffee shop at least 3 or 4 times a week all summer. Ken thought he was a nice guy. He wanted you to ask him out. I reminded myself as the despair settled over me in the dark kitchen like a lead blanket. My mom's eyes slowly filled with tears. I wondered if we were wrapped up in that blanket together. Because it's the same thing, right? Like we talked about in whatever one of those like very, very early quotes of the beautiful and beautiful poison. And Ken's not going to suspect the Chris Hemsworth guy that orders hot chocolate of all things, right? Nobody's gonna think that he would have done any of this. But the mom goes to Skye's job. Ken immediately clocks that this is Skye's mom, knows that something is wrong, and like pulls her off to the side to have a conversation. When my mom told Ken what she knew, which wasn't much, he looked increasingly worried. I hadn't come home, I wasn't answering my texts or calls, and the police weren't exactly racing to find me. Ken pulled out his phone to show her that I hadn't answered his text the night before either. I looked at the screen. Drive safe. If hot chocolate guy ever asks about you, I'm gonna send him to your dorm. It felt like I'd been turned into ice water. My mom's expression darkened. Who's hot chocolate guy? Yes, I prompted, standing up. The can lights in the lobby flickered. The espresso machine blinked erratically. That's right, that's him. Ken side-eyed the flickering lights. Just one of our regulars, inside joke. I teased her that she should ask him out all the time, write her phone number on his cup, but she never did. My mom's face fell. You don't think he has something to do with it? Ken shook his head. He was a really nice guy. She never asked him out, though. Oh, they have a little bit more back and forth, right? He's telling his mom everything that he knows, and they're sharing all this information, and Sky is listening, and she's trying to make the lights flicker whenever they're going down the right path of figuring something out, but they're not really reacting to it. He's just like, sorry, this place sucks, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then eventually the mom is like, hey, well, is there security cameras outside? Like, there's got to be some security footage of the plaza or something. He says, yeah, there are. Like, let's go back and look at it. And this really excites her. Like, maybe they'll be able to figure something out. Chapter 10, we're back with Megan. A week has passed. She's still just hanging out with her body because she doesn't really know what to do. And this chapter in this writing, I think, is exactly why this book got as high of a rating as it did by the masses. It is very beautiful writing. It's very poignant. It's very, you're in her shoes and you're feeling for it, right? Like, I feel very emotionally invested in these characters. I would love to read it to you. I try not to read too terribly much, though, whenever I do these reviews. So I do recommend reading it. If anything, at least to get this, like, almost existential, what does it mean to be a ghost thing going, which is like one of my favorite existential bad feelings in the entire world that I can trigger in myself. And so in this instance, her existential dread is like just thinking of like every memory she's ever had. And she ends up landing on thinking of her grandmother and all of these wonderful memories that she has of her. And then she swears to God that she hears a voice in the distance say, I'll be right here when you're ready. I abruptly stopped drifting and blinked at the quiet, dusty road in front of me. Had that always been part of the memory? Something I hadn't paid attention to when I was 10? There were plenty of details that I'd missed in the moment. Still, it sounded as if she was speaking to me, not the 10-year-old me, Megan, on the side of the road by a dusty, blood-stained shoe. A jolt of excitement, followed by a wave of terror, ran through me. What would it mean if she was? Part of me wanted to drift back then and there to find out, to see if I could talk to Bubby, to know whether she would talk back. But the part that had been sitting by the side of the road in the middle of the woods wasn't ready to find out, because the part of me that thought just maybe she was speaking to me couldn't quite process the disappointment if she wasn't. I wanted to hug the possibility for a while before I tested it, and that was when I heard the sound of another car. Distantly droning, smacking the potholes with muted, faraway thunks. The driver was a woman in her 20s. Hair piled on top of her head in a messy bun, a coexist bumper sticker was peeling off the front of her beat-up Jeep. Her lips were moving like she was singing, but her eyes were sad. Stop, I screamed as I watched her eyes flick to the barely noticeable fork in the road ahead, where the shoulder of the road dipped, then branched into the sorry excuse for a road, where my bones were slowly becoming part of the earth. The girl with the messy bun drove through me, and my tidal wave of feelings crashing invisibly around us both. Please stop, I whispered as the despair crashed harder. And then, even though I couldn't quite believe it was happening, she did. We go to Brescia. 2 years ago in Boulder, Colorado. She's watching as James is finishing getting ready, or Jimmy, or whatever the hell we want to call him, douchebag, as he is getting ready to go on this date. She's watching him put on a playlist of like 60s hits. She sees him pull out Rohypnol, which is like a date rape drug. And obviously this concerns her even more. James/Jamie. I thought it was Jimmy. Jamie? Whoever the heck, again, we'll just call him the douchebag, connected his phone to the car's Bluetooth and joined in with the last chorus of Sweet 16 by Neil Sedaka as we pulled away from the house east towards Denver. I studied his face, looking for any indication of a red flag, anything that would tell Nicole not to leave her drink alone, not to take her eyes off it for even a second, not to trust the chiseled, clean-cut jawline or the warm smile. There was nothing. Not right now. It had been exactly 1 week since he'd slipped through my side gate and waited for me to appear, and it had been almost 1 year since I had screened his last call. I never could have imagined the price I'd pay for rejecting him. That little bottle of Tic Tacs was apparently the price she would pay for inviting him into her life. The price for hoping that maybe he would be the one. Were there more people like me who had paid that price? More women who didn't want him, or who didn't realize they wanted nothing to do with him until it was too late? I forced myself to focus on the road in front of us and kept the rage bubbling inside me at a simmer. I couldn't afford to waste it. In chapter 12, back with Sky, now sitting with her mom and her coworker as they're going through the security footage. They see the Jameses or Jamie, whatever the hell. They see his blue Ford pull up, points it out, right? They see him get out of it, and he points out like, oh yeah, this is the regular that I had mentioned earlier. They go through watching, they get interrupted. Her coworker has to go and help out, and so he's going to email the rest of the security footage to the mom. Security footage is only good for 72 hours, and then the system like overwrites itself, so it's a good thing she came when she did to get this footage before it got deleted. So that's all good stuff. He downloads it, gets a copy, emails it to her. She's going to go through it when she gets home. Sky's dad is on a plane. He's on his way back. He meets with the mom. They watch the security footage together. You can't really see anything. In the back, though, like of this, because she knows what to look for. She's looking for his blue Ford. She sees him leave the parking lot and come back and park at the edge of it in the very back corner 4 separate times in that 2-hour window. He kept coming back and he was waiting for her to get off work. And then the final time, as she's leaving, he pulled out, but so did like another car, or like another car drove and like blocked the view of the camera. So she knew his car was gone, but her parents probably would have missed that the car had moved in that time. But what they did have on video was her at the very last second raising her hand to wave at somebody. And then she's completely off camera, like out of screen. And that's it. She's just gone after that point. But she waved at someone. There was something here, right? So they call the cops back. They call, and it's the same lady who picks up the phone, and they say, okay, fine, like a officer will be there to evaluate the case this afternoon since you have supposedly this evidence of your daughter going missing. It's a really crappy situation. But they're going to send somebody out. And you know, the mom is also thinking like, she's like, I still don't know what to do. You know, maybe if we just go back, if it was somebody she knew, maybe it was a regular at the coffee shop, right? So maybe whoever it is, they'll be back. Like maybe we need to go there. I perked up at this. Maybe he would be back. I felt sick at the idea of my parents running into him, but maybe, just maybe he'd come in. Maybe he'd let something slip, or maybe someone else who had been on shift or on a smoke break noticed me getting into his car. There were only so many threads to follow when someone disappeared into thin air. I thought about my body, lying still and broken off Blacks Creek Road. I both longed for and dreaded being found. It would snuff the light right out of my parents' eyes, but seeing the flickers of hope was worse, when I knew without a shred of doubt that there was no chance that I was coming back. Back with Megan in Utah 1 year before, the woman that was in the Jeep with the coexist bumper sticker comes to a stop, but not because she saw the shoe. It's because she pulls over to cry and sob loudly. She gets out of the car for a minute and she's just like trying to catch her breath and just obviously having like a very, very bad day. And Megan is just watching this, just like, again, begging, willing, screaming for this woman to just like notice the shoe and notice something. And please don't leave, please don't leave. The woman does though, right? She gets in her car, and as she's about to leave, she looks up and she notices the shoe. She goes and investigates. She goes back to her car, she grabs her phone, and she snaps a few photos of it. And Megan doesn't want to get her hopes up, right? I told myself that it didn't mean anything, that the photos couldn't possibly mean anyone would ever find me. For all I knew, she was planning to post the images to her Instagram account with the hashtags, #PickUpYourTrash and #ProtectOurPlanet. But as the engine turned over and she drove away, I still whispered, thank you, before I could no longer hear the sound of her engine. I also hate that we used engine twice in one sentence. Really wish we could have phrased that better. And that's what I mean of like, it's just like little shit that like I'm critiquing on this because it is a good story. Like I did look it up. So this is the second book that this author wrote. Interesting. Yeah, I was wondering if this was an early one. It definitely kind of reads like a little bit like a debut, but it also reads as if there wasn't like a big editor on this, which is interesting because I'm pretty sure this is like traditionally published. It's so frustrating to me to see so many like traditionally published book that like obviously either didn't get edited properly or somebody just didn't give a shit. You know what I mean? Whoever the editor was. Yeah, this was published by Dynamite Books, funded in 2004. That's crazy. That's crazy that you're going to have a book publishing thing that is that old with that much experience and you're going to let some shit like this get through. Obviously, I understand, saying engine twice in one sentence isn't some, egregious thing, but it kind of is. Again, I'm not trying to sound like a pretentious ass, but I don't know. Like I said, between that and a couple of the other ways that things get phrased sometimes, I'm just like... But that's good. If that's the only complaint that I have, then oh my God, what a good book. You know what I mean? What a good experience if that's the biggest thing that I can complain about, you know? Chapter 14, back with Brisha. She is watching as he goes on this date with this woman named Nicole. Date's going pretty okay, but he obviously drugs her drink and then starts pushing her pretty heavily to drink more and more. Brisha is doing all that she can to try to warn this woman to stop and to get out of here. And it's not really, maybe Nicole picked up the vibe from Brisha yelling this to her, or maybe she was just pissed off because this guy kept pressuring her to drink more alcohol, but she does not drink it. Instead, she texts her friend and has her friend come and get her because it was just bad vibes, and she leaves. She survives. She dodges this massive bullet. And of course, he tells the waitress that she was a bitch. Then he signed the receipt, no tip, and walked to the parking lot. So she did her part. At least this is one woman that got saved. In chapter 15, back to Sky in current day. Nobody saw anything, and the blue Kia didn't show up. My parents stood near the lobby entrance for 2 hours watching for anyone they thought they recognized in the parking lot, while my mom sent texts and Facebook messages to anyone who appeared in my friends list, asking if anyone had seen me, if I'd said anything that might offer any clue of where I was now. Nobody knew anything. My parents asked every single person who walked through the door to get coffee if they had seen me yesterday, while my dad flashed them my senior photo on his phone. So sad, dude. Finally, a cop comes and he's talking to them, and back and forth, they realize next door to the place where she works is a frozen yogurt shop. And they also have security cameras, and their security camera is at a different angle. So maybe they can see her. I am gonna cry again. I think I've talked about this before on the channel quite a few times. I love books about death and the afterlife, and my favorite trope in terms of romance books is love that perseveres, right, through lifetimes or through millennia or whatever. That's why I'm a big fan of paranormal romance and things of that nature. It's something about that, man, just gets me, right? And so in this chapter 16, when we go to Megan's point of view, she's still out in the woods staying by her body with nothing to really do. And so she's going more and more into her memories and kind of reliving all these different points of her life. And one of them is again with her grandmother. I started at the beginning of the memory, to the chalado, to the sound of my grandmother's delicate laughter and the way the bowl clinked against the counter as Bubby tipped it out onto the countertops and dipped her hands into the little hill of flour. I watched Grandma Rosie's eyes as 10-year-old me asked if I could watch TV while we waited for the dough to rise. I watched her mouth form the words, "Yes, of course, Bubba." And then, while the younger version of myself hurried up the stairs, I tried to hold on to Bubby. "I'm so sorry I left you to make the bread," I told her. I felt myself grasping at the edges of the memory. 10-year-old me didn't have any more memories of Bubby here. She just had memories of Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Specifically, the episode where Sabrina tells her friends that she's a witch. The threads were unraveling quickly. "I wish I had more memories with you," I whispered before I lost them. Bubby's soft, rosy cheeks turned up a slight smile. "Ah, but here you are, Bubba." I felt a jolt of electricity as the threads stopped unraveling, the focus suddenly clear again. I wasn't drifting anymore. Instead of watching myself sprawl out on the bed and watch Sabrina tell her friends the truth about being a witch, I was still in the kitchen with Bubby. It was more than that, though. Before, I had been a fly on the wall, a voyeur, I guess, watching the interaction. It had been kind of like a movie. Now I was in the kitchen, and Bubby Rosie was looking at me intently, her hands still covered in flour. The feeling spread through me like sunlight, and for the first time since I disappeared into the hills, I felt a spark of joy. "Bubby, you can hear me?" I'd expected the words to sound choked, like they would if I were trying to squeeze them out through all my feelings if I were alive. Instead, they seemed to drift into the memory with me, perfectly clear, caught by the current that surrounded me and Grandma Rosie. I can hear you, Bubba. I've been waiting for you. Her eyes crinkled with joy and then softened with sadness. I had not expected to see you so soon. You're alive? I mean, not alive, but I don't understand any of this. Is this heaven or something? Bubby Rosie's face broke into a smile. I wasn't sure whether we could hug. I doubted it. Not like before, anyway. Physical sensation had died when I died. But the joy that filled me to the brim and the love that radiated from Grandma Rosie's voice was as warm and comforting as any hug that I had ever had when I was alive. I don't know the answer to that question, Bubba. She looked down at her hands covered in flour. All I know is that we are here together in this memory and somehow still connects us. No. How? I struggled to put the pieces together. Is there like a god or something? What have you been doing all this time? What happens now? Bubby's smile softened. I don't know the answer to those questions either, Bubba. What I know is that the people we loved on the other side are gone. I mourned you like you mourned me when I died. But I have learned, as you know now, that the people we love are not gone forever, that everything we have ever loved, ever did, ever said, ever read, ever experienced comes back to us. See, here we are together. She gestured around the sunlit kitchen. So you live here now in this memory? And some of my other memories? Bubby nodded. In a way, yes, like you live in mine. It's the tapestry we wove together, the threads that still bind us. We can't make any more memories together, though. It's just like a movie? She shook her head. That's what I wondered at first, too, but Bubba, there are so many movies you have not seen. That's crazy. I'm literally going to cry. I'm trying so hard to keep it inside of my eyeballs. This is not going well for me. I stared at her in confusion. She continued. Those threads, they branch out forever. If you know the way to go, lifetimes of threads. Mine, yours, she gestured around us. So many threads. Ima is here. Nasi is here. I will show you. Ima, mother, her mother, my great-grandmother who I had never met. Nasi, her little prince, Ben, my uncle who had died of an overdose when I was a baby. Oh. I tilted my head. I don't have any memories of them, though. She died before I was born, and I really only met Uncle Ben once right after I was born. Grandma Rosie nodded. That doesn't matter anymore, Bubba. We couldn't see so many of the threads that tied us together while we were alive. Those threads are visible now. She paused and then added, if you know the way. And she goes on and she's like, we can follow the threads together. The story I told you about your mother when she was a little girl carrying spiders from the house under paper cups. We can visit that memory together. I can show it to you because I was there even though you were not. I suddenly understood what she meant, and the shadow of despair disappeared. So many memories, an eternity of memories stretching backward forever. Show me, I told her excitedly. This meant I could meet my Uncle Ben. Bro, I can't do this. I could meet my great-grandmother. I hadn't lost my family forever. Yes, I'd lost some of them, for now, but in a strange way, I'd also just found the ones I'd lost. And so then Grandma Rosie shakes her head and she's like, I can when you're ready, but you're not ready yet. You have to go back. And like, if we go down these memories and we do all this stuff, she's like, you're not going to be able to go back. And like, you still have business you have to finish, like, you know, Earthside or whatever. And she's like, oh, Grandma, I can't. I'm lost out here. I'm alone. This is so sad. Jesus Christ. And so eventually she's like, okay, well, I'm going to go take care of that. Like, I'll find you again, right? I can find you here. And she says, yes, you can always find me here or anywhere our lives touched. I love you, little doll. And then she ends up back at the side of the road. I found myself back on the shoulder of the rutted dirt road, beside the pebble and the little shard of glass and the coins and the shoe. I was reminded of the feeling, right, that's the collection from the Raven of all their little trinkets. Oh my God. I was reminded of the feeling of waking up from a too late nap in the afternoon when you sleep until dinner time and aren't sure for a few moments what happened. The sound of crunching footsteps hit me before I recognized that there was someone there with me, someone standing over me, looking directly at me, looking at the shoe. The man had a thick auburn beard. He was in his 50s and wearing a tan shirt and pants. In one hand, he held a radio. My gaze drifted in slow motion to the lapel of his shirt. Forest Service. Guys, I can't do this. I can't do this. We're 33% of the way through the book. Okay, now that I am done crying, we go into chapter 17, Brescia. It is 18 months before current day. Okay? So it's the day after he had the date with Nicole, and he and his family are driving to Utah, where they're going to live now, right? They're moving from Colorado to Utah. There's a whole scene where he finds out that his Matchstrike account got reported and closed or whatever, and so he calls to try to fix it and explain that this was some mix-up, and the lady says, okay, yeah, that's fine, but then it means I have to elevate this, and they're gonna do an interview with you and Nicole and, you know, determine blah, 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 and then he's like, never mind, and ends up hanging up, and it's a whole thing, but he's all pissy about this account being suspended. So the first few months in Utah after he moves, he's normal. He's just doing normal dad stuff and getting situated, but eventually the time comes that he does want to go on a date again. And so he makes a new email address, he makes a new account, and then this is when he begins going by Jimmy. And he goes on a whole bunch of dates, and she goes with him, and anytime she can, she's like screaming in their ears to get away. She's making the lights flicker. She's trying to change stoplights and do all this stuff. And a lot of the times something happens, right? The women pick up bad vibes, whatever it is. And every single time a date goes sideways, he immediately goes onto his phone and blocks and reports them for making him uncomfortable. And that way they can't then turn around and block him, right? Because he did it first. And so he's the innocent guy. So even if he did give off creepy bad vibes, they can't report him and get his account closed or something. I don't know. I wasn't on dating apps like that to know if there's any truth to anything that's happening right now. I'm just telling you what I'm learning about, okay? So goes on all of these dates. There's a particular date where he goes on with this woman named Elle, and he brings her home. She's very clearly drugged. He brought a phone charger with him, and he's like running it like across her neck as if he's about to strangle her. But he gets a text message from his wife about how one of the girls is sick, and so he leaves. Follows up, has another date with this girl, but she gets wildly uncomfortable because she's like, hey, I don't remember how our other date ended. This back and forth. And then eventually she ends up leaving, does not block him, does not really report him or anything, and just continues to send her harassing messages on the app, but she still just ignores him until eventually he decides to go back to her house and like finish the job. Luckily for her, when he goes to her home, her father is visiting, and so James decides to not kill her this night. And Brescia is just sitting there watching all of this happen and realizing that there's really nothing that she can do. Holy quality drop. I know. I have a new camera set up if you've watched a couple of my videos, and I'm still trying to get used to operating that and the new setup and all the SD cards and all this crazy stuff I have to be responsible for now. It is taking a lot of getting used to. So I'm going to have to finish this video on the webcam, which is fine. But let me see where I left off. I just want to acknowledge the change off the bat. So he decides to leave Elle alone, but inevitably he, of course, does go on another date. And this time he is about to go on a date with a woman named Megan, which is the Megan that we know that we're following on one of our other like timelines or chapter perspectives, whatever you want to call it. When we cut to chapter 18, we are back to Sky's perspective on present day. Her parents are watching the security footage from the Froyo shop, and they can see the car that she was talking to, and they can see that it was like in frame a couple different times, right? That he kept coming into the parking lot, and they have a license plate number. But it's too grainy and it's black and white, so they can't tell the color of the vehicle and they can't really see the guy. But I'm also like, okay, but you have the video footage from the other one. If you know the car in the parking spot, why wouldn't you look and compare it to the other security footage to figure out the color of the vehicle? I don't know why we're not like piecing these things together, but that's fine, I guess. And so they at least have something. They're gonna run these plates, which is great. And Sky is having conflicted feelings of like, yes, she wants him caught and wants him to get justice, but also her parents finding out and getting the confirmation that she's dead is going to be horrific because there's no way of her coming back. Chapter 19, Megan, the forest ranger that had found the shoe of hers, right, takes photos and he leaves. A couple days later, a police cruiser shows up and Megan is there still waiting, right, by her skeleton, and she hears the cars coming, so she's still going to investigate. And when the cop gets out, it is a woman cop. It's Officer Demonska, and Officer Demonska is looking all around. She's taking it all in, looking at the shoe, and it looks like she's about to drive away. And so Megan comes to terms with, okay, I guess I'm never going to get found. I can't just wait here forever. Like, I'm just going to cross over and go and be with my grandma, you know? But luckily, before she does that and fully dedicates, she sees the officer come over and is now very, very close to the skeleton. And she's like in the clearing now. And she says, "Are you there, Megan?" Megan? What? Now, is she imagining this voice? I don't know. It's kind of unclear. There's been like a couple times where things will happen and they'll like, I don't know. I don't know if it's like intuited, or if it's actually happening, or what exactly the situation is. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, so the cop calls out her name. She can't respond, but she tries to as much as she can. And eventually the officer does in fact spot her bones. Megan's body has been found. And when we go into chapter 20, we're back into Brisha's point of view, and she is on this date, right? She's on this date with James and Megan, and she's witnessing all of this happen. And she can't do anything to stop it, right? She's just watching the worst possible thing occur in front of her, and it's watching this woman get murdered. And she's really, really confused when after Megan gets murdered, she sees her get up and like run off into the woods. I nearly went after her into the woods. I wanted to tell her that I was sorry, that she wasn't alone, that she wasn't invisible. Not to me, anyway. I didn't want to haunt him anymore. What was the point if I couldn't stop this from happening? Maybe there was no rhyme or reason to why I was still here in limbo, following him around like a puppy. A darker thought crept in. Maybe I just hadn't figured out how to stop him in time. I had failed her. I called Megan's name again as I heard the car's engine start behind me. The fact was that I couldn't help her. Not anymore. That much I knew for certain. She was dead. Like me. I had nothing to offer her, and I couldn't face her. The only thing I could do was follow him back to the car before he disappeared again. And so she did call out for Megan, right? Megan had initially heard that when she died and was running into the woods. That did happen. That was a voice that called after her. And then Brisha just left. And when we go into chapter 21, this is where I said, oh, we're back to my whole thing about the editing. Because this chapter opens, it was my useless phone that led them to the foothills off Blacks Creek Road 3 days after I was supposed to be driving to ISU. Okay. That exact sentence was in chapter 6. It was my useless phone that led them to my body in the foothills off Blacks Creek Road 3 days after I was supposed to be driving to college. Even without service, the phone had pinged off cell phone towers in Boise and Kuna. And once the police had finally started searching, I wasn't exceptionally hard to find. And then it goes into her not being found yet and her just like waiting by her body. And so in chapter 6 earlier, when I was giving you guys like a rundown thing, there's a chunk where I edited out because I thought I misunderstood what happened. I was like, wait, I thought they already found her body. No, they didn't, but it said she did. But no, her body wasn't actually found until chapter 21, where it uses the exact same introductory paragraph with a change of college to ISU. Again, I'd fire whoever edited this freaking book. And also, once the officer ordered the phone records, things moved quickly. And once the police started searching the right area, I wasn't exceptionally hard to find. Because I guess now that the officer was invested in like watching this, they decided to take it seriously, so they do the cell phone tracing. I'm like, why are we... Okay, I guess it's only been 3 days. But still. And then she didn't want to be a part of it because she didn't want to watch her parents find her. And so she ends up tagging along on the ride as all of the, the cops and stuff go out there trying to like locate her body based off of the pinging off of all these different cell phone towers. And then I wasn't there and finally they do find her body, obviously. And then I wasn't there when they told my parents. By the time Officer Willis drove back down Blacks Creek, it was well after midnight. My body had been photographed. Evidence, including my cell phone, a cigarette butt, some candy wrappers, and a partial tire track, had been cataloged and tucked into plastic bags. And then very just depressing thoughts and depressing scenes when she does go home and find her parents after they had been told and they're just grieving and it's not good. In chapter 22, with Megan, 6 months before, as strange as it sounds, I missed the mountains, my burial grounds. I didn't think twice about jumping into the front seat of Detective Demonska's police cruiser, but as the rutted, narrow road finally split out onto a paved road with signs directing us toward Cedar Fort, I wished I had at least said goodbye to the Raven. She wouldn't have known. I knew that. I missed her anyway, though. Grandma Rosie's words echoed in my memory as we drove. I'll be here when you're ready. I wasn't sure what I would learn at the police station exactly, but I no longer felt a gnawing desperation. I wanted to be found. I wanted to see him arrested. Maybe he already had been. I wanted to say goodbye to my family. Surely there would be a funeral now. And then I wanted to pass on. And so what we do learn is that she had gotten reported missing by her friend, and then it wasn't very helpful because obviously she didn't have his real name. She just had like a fake kind of similar name, and his email address was fake, and so that wasn't very helpful. He had registered the account with a fake name, a fake email address, and a VPN. The best Matt Strike could do, even with his messages in my defunct account, was to confirm that his bogus account had been created a year earlier on July 15th. The last time it had been accessed was the day I disappeared. He'd deleted the account soon after. They did recover his profile photo, which was zoomed out far enough that it was hard to see a lot of detail, especially in the low-res web upload. I remembered the feeling of relief when I met him at Gracie's. He wasn't a Neanderthal. His photo didn't do him justice, not even a little bit. They ran the photo through facial recognition software, but it was too low-res and zoomed out to deliver any matches. My phone had been bagged as evidence. A partial print from his car, not mine, had been recovered. It wasn't in the database. My phone had been bagged for evidence. A partial print from his car, not mine, had been recovered. Okay. And so then she just begins following the detective around, trying to see what would happen and if she'll get saved. During the day, I followed Detective Demonska around like a puppy. I wasn't her only case, but as a commenter in one article stated bluntly, I was a pretty white girl, and now I had been found, the missing persons case turned into a manhunt. After some debate, Detective Demonska turned his photo over to the press, asking for anyone with information about his identity to come forward. The next morning, his photo appeared next to mine in the articles. I learned from Detective Demonska's reports they received more than 500 tips by phone, email, and even the police department's Facebook page that day. The tips continued to pour in the following day from a woman who had been out with a creep from Match Strike who fit his description. Dark hair, dark eyes, tall, handsome. This is where I would like to say pause. I haven't brought this up, but they described his eyes as amber or dark amber. Like amber is used 4 times with his dark amber eyes. His eyes weren't warm or even amber colored anymore. His amber eyes, black in the darkness. His amber eyes, I swear they looked like dark liquid gold. Okay, so are they liquid gold or are they dark? There were so many calls. Some of the women were in tears on the phone. One woman in Wyoming had been assaulted on her date. Another had narrowly escaped. I wrote along on every follow-up that Detective Demonska made personally. I didn't expect to actually find him. When I told my friend that he was a needle in a haystack, I hadn't known how fitting that expression would become. Okay, also interesting. And also interesting that it was in Wyoming, because neither of our 3 women that we've learned about so far have been in Wyoming. And that goes back to what I was saying, that his cool down period and like him wanting to go out and murder people happening so quickly back to back to back to back like this would be more indicative of there were other victims, not just these 1 year aparts of these 3 that we're introduced to, right? Chapter 23, Brescia, 1 year before the present, After he killed Megan, he deleted his account. He erased his browser history, cleared his cache. I thought he was doing all of this on incognito. I thought he was doing this on a VPN incognito mode. What the fuck do you mean he erased his browser history? He cleared his cache, deleted the messages he'd sent her and anyone else. If you deleted your account, would your messages not be deleted as well? Why would you not say that he deleted his account as the last thing after he did all the clearing of the account? Scrubbed every trace of Jimmy Carlson from the internet that he could. What other trace would there have possibly been other than a random email address and a dating account? How many times did he use this name for other things? What are you talking about? This is, okay, you know what? Actually, I don't think I like this anymore. I don't think I like this book. I like parts of this book. Like I said, I'm emotionally invested. Y'all saw my ass crying 2 separate times. I knew it wasn't easy to erase yourself. Nothing on the web was ever really gone, but only if someone was looking for it. A few weeks later, he announced to April that he was quitting his job for the IT company in Salt Lake. They'd treated him like dirt, he said, underpaid him, underutilized him. It was time to move on. Plus, the office manager and most of his coworkers were worthless. April stared at him in shock. Her eyes welled up with tears as she gestured to the house around them and the living room that she had just finished decorating. I'd been there when she'd opened the package containing new fuzzy throw pillows a few days earlier. They have a whole back and forth in a fight, and April is obviously like, no, we can't, like, we have the girls. We said we would be here until high school. And then he pushes back again, and April ultimately has to concede because she's not exactly paying the mortgage, and she just kind of has to do whatever he wants and support him through whatever because she is trapped in this relationship, especially with the girls, without having a job, without doing these things. She is reliant on him, which is really, really scary. And this goes back to a thing that I try to say in all of my videos. Don't, if you can help it, obviously there's like extenuating circumstances, don't ever be fully reliant on anybody. I don't care how great and wonderful of a person they are, or that they've never done anything wrong and they would never hurt a fly. Do not ever be fully reliant on anybody. Have an escape plan. I don't care how happy and great everything is. Just getting off my soapbox. That's all I have to say. If you can, do it. Just like avoid those types of situations as much as you possibly humanly can, okay? April was extra quiet a few days after he told her he was quitting. But when he didn't mention it again, she gradually softened and carried on like normal. I understood that she had heard this before. 3 months later, when he abruptly announced that he'd found a new job in Idaho, she smiled weakly, then went into the bedroom to lie down with the girls and the cat for story time. I lay down on the bed next to Emma. I savored this nightly tradition. When we shut the door, and April read to the girls. The cat glanced at me, then settled down beside April and continued purring. April told the girls the story of the fox and the hound, reading from a bent paperback Disney book tucked into the shelf by the door. Unlike the Pony Pals and the Fairies, this was a bittersweet book. 2 friends from different worlds. You knew right from the start that it wasn't going to end particularly well, but you kept hoping anyway. When April got to the part about the old dog, Chief, breaking his leg during a hunt for the fox, Kimmy chimed in. The fox didn't want that old dog to get hurt, Mama. April nodded. They'd clearly had this conversation before. That's right, baby. The fox was just trying to get away. He was scared. Emma sat up in bed. But that dog wanted to hurt the fox. He meant it. April hesitated, and then she nodded again. Yes, that's just his nature, though. He can't help it, honey. I stayed at the foot of Emma's bed as April turned off the lights and closed the girls' bedroom door. There were foxes and there were hounds. And then there were the animals who didn't fit into the natural order of things at all, who meant the hurt they caused every time. Okay, I'm not even going to unpack that. Chapter 24. We're back with Miss Sky in Idaho, and she is watching her funeral. And speaking of people from different worlds and knowing that things are going to end differently, the news of my kidnapping and murder had blazed hot and bright throughout Idaho for a few days. My senior photo stared back at me from the front page of the Idaho Report, which my mom had neatly folded and tucked beside the computer in her office. In the short amount of time it took for a funeral procession to make its way to Hulls Gulch, a story about a local murder-suicide had taken the front page news. I wasn't surprised. I was a brown girl from a poor neighborhood in Kuna. Sometimes when I sat beside my mom in the car as she drove to work or picked up dinner for herself, I watched the faces of the people on the street, wondering if there were other ghosts like me. If there were, would I even know it? Or were they tucked into houses and cars like I was, haunting the people they loved? Yikes. So compared to, yeah, yikes. Yikes, yikes, yikes. I feel like I just keep saying that. So now we're with Megan in Utah, 6 months before, continuing to get tips. Like we said, her case hit like wildfire, and they're just like continually getting tips and follow-up calls. And so they end up getting a tip, and they figure out where James works. And Officer Damonska even takes him in for questioning. And he denies that he's the man in the photo. And he's like, I have a wife and kids. I'm happily married. Why would I have a dating app? Like, that doesn't even make any sense. And she just kind of plays it off and ignores him, right? And she's like, well, do you recognize this girl? Maybe you were the man at the bar with her. I bet I could ask the bartender, see if the bartender recognizes you. And then he's like, gets all pissy. And he's like, I'm moving. I have to leave. I'm leaving Utah in 2 weeks. Just, you're just like making all these accusations, blah, blah, blah. She's like, okay, got it. You're free to go. You're not under arrest, but I'm going to need your new address for when I have additional questions. Like, I'm going to need your contact info. And of course, he was all pissy about this. And so she follows Officer Damonska, who is, I guess, like processing and doing the aftermath of like an interview situation like this, and is saying, yeah, get the caller, like call them back, push hard, and then find this James Carson guy online. See if you can find a good photo so we can send a lineup to the waitress. If she identifies him, that's enough to get a warrant to search his car. He's leaving the state in 2 weeks. We need to lock this down before then, and I don't want to deal with extradition. My heart, or whatever still held me together, soared. It was impossible to know how much I had contributed to Damonska's hunch, but I decided to believe that this gut feeling she had was partly my doing. Grandma Rosie would still be waiting for me in 2 weeks. I could stay in limbo a little longer, because I really wanted to see this bastard go down. Which, again, I love that as a concept for a book. I'm absolutely obsessed with this, right? Chapter 26, we're with Brescia yet again, 6 months before. He moves his family to Idaho, and this is where, like, this is all getting twisty. I guess the whole 2 week thing in wherever they were before, Utah, didn't work out, and so they moved, and so now they're in this new house, they're getting settled, but he gets a phone call because he's getting continually questioned by the police. They still haven't given up on him as a suspect. So he gets pissed off. He's yelling in the phone. He throws his phone across the room. It's a very, very dramatic, angry moment. And as she's taking all of this in, she's also taking in the fact that he has a coffee cup on his desk next to him. It's Sky, right? So now we're like all converging. All of our women are starting to converge. And she sees the cup, right? I'd never seen him or April drink coffee before. I'd sort of been under the impression that it was against their religion. It's not coffee, it's hot chocolate, right? I stood in the hallway, still staring at the smiley face. It wasn't one of the scribbled, hastily drawn ones. It was a whole cute little face with eyelashes and everything. I told myself it meant nothing. It was a coffee cup. I moved my gaze to the computer. The screen was black. If the police were questioning him, maybe he was lying low, staying off of match strike. Maybe they'd even catch him for what he did to Megan, and to me. There was a creak from the basement stairs. April was coming down. He made an exasperated noise and scanned the room, and then he plucked the empty coffee cup from the trash can and shoved it into a desk drawer out of sight. I backed into the hallway. April was hovering at the bottom of the stairs. She appeared to be trying to decide whether to ask him about the yelling. She must have heard the phone hit the wall. Instead, she padded back upstairs and peeked inside the girls' room. When she saw that they were sleeping soundly, she closed her eyes and let out a sigh of relief. Then she scooped up the cat from the floor, made her way to the master bedroom, and tucked the covers around herself. Generally, I didn't pay much attention to what April did with her phone. The few times I'd looked, she was arranging play dates for her daughters or playing Candy Clash with K's instead of Candy Crush. Why wouldn't you just say an app or playing a game? Why would you? Okay. Or scrolling through her endless Instagram feed, but tonight the look on her face as she glanced toward the bedroom door, then peered at her screen with a furrowed brow, made me slide over to see what she was looking at. She'd pulled up a news article about Megan's murder. With her thumb and forefinger, she was zooming in and out on a grainy black and white image of her husband. I'd watched in disbelief as she opened a new browsing window and typed in, "Can childhood trauma lead to violence?" She stared at the search results without clicking on any of them. A quote from a research article was displayed at the top of the results. "It is widely accepted that childhood trauma increases the likelihood of violent behavior." After a few seconds, April opened a text thread from 3 weeks earlier, right before they had moved. It was a message from someone named Nina that had been left unread. The message was long. It filled up most of the entire screen. It was an apology. Nina thought that the man in the newspaper looked just like James, and she had mentioned it to the Salt Lake police. It was probably nothing. She should have told April first before contacting the police she was so sorry, but she couldn't stop thinking about how similar they looked. Maybe he had a brother. I had no idea who Nina was. At the end of the text, she mentioned seeing the girls on Sunday, so I assumed she was a fellow church member. April read and reread the text message. She finally closed the messaging app, erased her browsing history, and placed her phone carefully on the nightstand, burying her face into the cat's furry, rumbling side. And I swear to God, if they blame this on childhood trauma and that's why he turned into this, I'm going to be so fucking mad. I'm literally going to be so mad. In chapter 27, Sky, present day, in Idaho, a month after her funeral, they found him. An officer pulled him over on a traffic stop in Meridian. He had had a taillight out. When the officer ran his plates, flagged in the database in connection to my murder, she brought him to the station for questioning. I wasn't there when they questioned him about me. He was in and out of the police station in 20 minutes. Detective Kittleson called my mom later the following day. James had refused to answer any questions without a lawyer present. Then he calmly asked if he was free to go. And he was, so they gave him a ticket for this. Detective Kittleson told my parents that the district attorney had significant reservations about pursuing him as a suspect at this time. The Daily Grind, which is the coffee shop she worked at, security footage that showed the license plate on the dark-colored Kia. It was a Kia, not a Ford. I think I was saying a Ford earlier. That was my bad. I was lying to you. On the dark-colored Kia didn't show me anywhere near the vehicle, and the Froyo video that showed me actually getting into a dark-colored sedan didn't show the license plate. Not to mention that the driver was hardly more than a dark blur. A positive ID was almost impossible. Okay, so then I guess they did do the whole connect the dots thing that I was talking about on there. So was he not shown coming out of the car? I thought the guy recognized him on the security footage. Hello? I thought the coworker recognized him on the security footage. Am I f***ing high? So every time a car entered the parking lot or an employee exited the building, he hit play. I went back to the chapter 12 where the mom and the coworker were watching the security footage. James walked into the Daily Grind and then reemerged a few minutes later with his hot chocolate. My mom frowned when he got back into the car and drove away. It was slow going. Okay, so, hello? What the fuck are you talking about? Unless I guess maybe potentially there's like a gap in the footage, and so I guess you could say like a car had magically appeared, but not really. If they're like pointing the same way, you would be able to track the car from like one camera to the other camera, like one frame to the other frame of the camera. Or you know what I'm trying to say here. What the fuck are we talking about? I'm like so mad. This seems like so freaking dumb to me, and I'm getting more and more frustrated with this actually. Actually, genuinely, how far into this am I? Good God, I'm going to need a break. I think I'm only like halfway, which is kind of sad. Also, I'm only halfway and I feel like we're already getting we're solving some crimes. So what the heck is about to happen? How are we going to drag this out? A few days after they found James, Detective Kittleson finally managed to get a search warrant for the blue Kia. I was sure it would have taken him even longer if not for my mom's repeated phone calls. They were looking for blood, fingerprints, hair, and fibers, any evidence that I had ever been in the car. My mom was ecstatic. I was hopeful too. I'd touched the door handle in the inside of the car. Surely he couldn't have scrubbed every trace of me from it. And so the detective goes to collect the car. Obviously, when he goes to his house, the wife answers. Detective announced the warrant's scope, the keys to the Kia itself. I shifted my gaze to the two little girls. Unlike April, they were totally oblivious to the magnitude of what was happening on their front porch. I was so busy looking at the three of them that I didn't even notice the fourth person standing a few feet behind them in the hallway until she stepped forward. She had straight brown hair and wide hazel eyes with the thickest set of eyelashes I had ever seen. She was wearing a comfy-looking burgundy velvet tracksuit. She appeared to be about the same age as April. Was this a sister? A nanny? From the expression on her face, my first thought was that she looked like she had seen a ghost too. And she had, because she looked right at me and whispered, "Are you dead?" Okay, I'm back in. All of a sudden, I'm back in. So, Megan, now, everybody's now. Like, is everybody going to continue to be in the now timeline? I fucking hope, please, for the love of God. Megan, now, Salt Lake City, Utah. She is following the detective as they are questioning folks, right? And so questioning the server, showing photos of James, and the waitress can't confirm that this is the guy that she was on the date with. And she's starting to lose hope, right? They're starting to lose steam on the case. Obviously, the suspect left. They can't find anything. And it's just like not going well. At this point, it's been a couple of weeks and it's just not going well. However, this changes when Detective Demonska receives a phone call from Ken, the friend. Sky's friend / coworker from the coffee shop. And he says, "Hey, I think the man in your article, right, this article that has gone big nationwide, trying to figure out who killed Megan, looks like maybe the guy that killed my friend Sky." So, but Sky, the pictures and the police, okay, because we're in Salt Lake and we're in Idaho, right? And so when you go back to Idaho, back to Brescia, I'm lost. Are you lost? Oh no, I just said I was locked in and then now I lost the plot. In chapter 29, we're in Idaho. We're with Brescia and they are searching James's car. And Brescia and Sky talk to each other. But they're not going to sit there and have a little kiki and catch up with each other and figure out what the heck is going on because they don't want to miss the car search. And so they go and hop in the Kia. As it's getting towed away, they are able to get into the back of it. And then in the back of the Kia, while it's getting towed to the police station, they talk and catch up. After the detective from Utah had called a couple of months earlier, James had a less than patiently explained to April that he was the target of a witch hunt, and it was April's fault. The woman in their old congregation in Utah, the one who had sent April those texts, had called the police when she saw the similarity between James and the photo in the news, had opened this can of worms. April hadn't done shit about it. She hadn't even shown him the text message until he stumbled across them while looking for a photo on her phone. So they had to hire a lawyer they couldn't really afford. I knew they could afford it easily. April didn't, though. She had almost nothing to do with their finances. He transferred a few hundred into a checking account she used for groceries and the occasional outfit when the girls needed new clothes. That was it. So when the detective from Utah had called her cell a few days after she called James. What? Hold on. So when the detective from Utah had called her cell a few days after she called James. The detective had called James. April stayed on the phone for less than 30 seconds, just long enough to repeat the line she had been instructed to deliver about all of the questions going on through their lawyer. But afterward, while Emma was at school and Kimmy was taking a nap, she opened an incognito browser and searched for Megan Campbell murder. She read every article. She scrutinized the photo of him up close. She shook her head as if exasperated with herself for even entertaining the idea that her husband, her James, could be involved in anything like that. Then she shut the browser and went to pick Emma up from school. But she had already pulled up a news article about Megan's murder. Brescia watched her pull up an article about Megan's murder in chapter 26. So why are you telling me again in chapter 29? She looked up this murder thing after the detective had initially called her husband. And then what? She gets a phone call from the detective weeks later and then looks up these murder articles again, which I mean is understandable if she did that. But the way that it's phrased in this, it makes it sound like that's some groundbreaking revelation that she had no idea about Megan's death before. Girl, what is happening right now? And then they have a heart-to-heart, Brescia and Sky tell each other about their murders, and Brisha tells her about how she had witnessed Megan being murdered and didn't do anything to help, and she like apologizes to Sky for not being able to like catch him sooner, and she's like reassuring her that it's nobody's fault, just his. Okay. And Brisha was not with him when he murdered Sky because he hadn't been downloading Match Strike, and so she thought that he was done killing people, or at least that he was like on, again, in his like cooldown period, or like just not doing anything. And so that's why she wasn't there for Sky's murder. But yeah, so she's like, no, seriously, it's not your fault. It's nobody's fault. It's just his. The car was pretty clean. There was no blood, no hair, no fibers of significant interest. There was, however, a fingerprint. Just one that didn't match with April, the girls, or James himself. It was on the front passenger side of the vehicle where the seat connected to the base of the car. Sky and I looked at each other. Both of us knew it could mean anything, that justice wasn't guaranteed, that sometimes bad people got away with doing bad things and never paid the price. After all, he'd gotten away with my murder for years now. For years now? Oh, I guess it was 2 years. He'd gotten away with Sky's murder for months. He'd gotten away with all of it. There was a very small chance that the fingerprint was hers. 0 chance it was mine. The only time I'd been in his car was as a ghost. Most likely, it was one from one of the many other women that he'd met on Match Strike. The ones he had wowed and terrified and annoyed, but not murdered. So we didn't grin at each other the way I might have before. Sky just followed the tech to the lab where I stayed with Detective Kittleson. Because a small chance was still a chance, and small chances were all we had left. We go into chapter 30. We are 60% of the way through the book, and I am going to call it quits for tonight. I'm probably going to finish reading this tonight or tomorrow, and I will come back to you and finish this up. Like I said, I'm having like 2 very extreme conflicting feelings about this book, and I don't know where I'm sitting. We'll see how it ends. We'll see where we go. I think I mostly like it. Yeah, I don't know. Hello, it's a day later. I have a new tattoo. In chapter 30, we're back with Sky, still in Idaho. They are analyzing the weird fingerprint from James's car. Unfortunately, it does not match Sky's, and she decides that she's going to stay with Brisha instead of going back to her mom and like hanging out around her home. She's going to spend her time with Brisha because, I mean, she's the only person that like knows what she's going through, right? And kind of understands this. So they're going to stay together. And while they're together at the police station, just watching all of this go down, they watch as the Idaho police station receives a phone call from Detective Demonska in Utah saying, hey, we have a lead. I think these cases like might be related, right? I need you to call me as soon as possible. Great. Okay, so we're starting to tie things together. Even the cops are finally starting to tie things together. Speaking of Salt Lake City, how's Megan doing in chapter 31? Well, she's watching Detective Demonska. By the time the detective from Idaho called Demonska back, it was nearly dinner time. She'd given him her cell, which rang right as we were about to walk out the door with Joey. I believe Joey is her dog. I'd never seen Demonska lose her cool before, not with the egg-headed waitress from Gracie's, not even with James Carson himself when she'd questioned him face to face. But when she heard that Detective Kittleson had released James Carson's car out of impound, before even calling her back to report on the fingerprint he had found, she ripped him a new one. He'd tersely agreed to make sure my fingerprint was run in the lab that night. When he muttered something about overtime and staff shortages, Demonska blew up at him again. Kittleson hung up without saying goodbye, and all of us, including Joey, made a beeline back to the office to send over the file with my fingerprints. Okay, great. So fingerprints, obviously, like we said, it didn't match the other women's. Hopefully, fingers crossed, it'll match Megan's. Chapter 32, in Idaho with Brisha. Like we said, she and Sky are hanging out at the police station, so they also got to witness this phone call with Detective Demonska, and they are also witnessing when James returns to the police station to pick up his car out of impound, and he is very tense. He looked different since I'd last seen him, less at ease, less interested in pretenses, on high alert. April had driven him there. Kimmy and Emma were with her. None of them got out of the car. James didn't know what detectives knew, or rather what they didn't know, but he knew the net was closing. I hate the way that was phrased. Sky and I looked at each other as James put the keys in the ignition. We both felt the pull to follow the officer back to the station, but there was something in James's eyes that told me I should jump into the back of his car. Sky wavered at the threshold of the police station. She saw it too. I'm going with James, okay? She said hesitantly. If somebody needs to mess with Kittleson's computer, I'm not sure I could do it. I didn't want her to leave. Not now. She was right. Someone needed to follow James. I nodded. If anything happens, get back to the station as fast as you can, okay? You know the way back here? She nodded, and then she jumped into the back of the Kia as he pulled out of the parking lot behind April and the girls. And so now I'm like, how are you getting into the Kia? Right? Because we said before they have to have like a little opening and kind of like will themselves in through the air opening. So I'm like, are the windows cracked? Did he leave a door open? Are you able to just like imagine how not airtight the car is and that's how you can weasel your way into it? Because I thought we had a system here, you know what I mean? I'm like, I thought we had rules. I thought we had rules and I feel like nobody is abiding by them. Chapter 33, Megan, Salt Lake City. Turns out the fingerprint was a match for Megan's. When we got the news, Demonska's office turned into a hive of activity. The warrant for his arrest by the state of Utah was secured in less than 2 hours. Demonska's assistant arranged for an agency assist from Officer Kittleson in Idaho to make the arrest. Early the next morning, I was riding shotgun on the way to Idaho to find him, which wasn't going to be as easy as it should have been, since the car had already been released out of impound. Detective Kittleson insisted they'd let him walk out of the impound lot because they had nothing concrete to hold him in Idaho. No evidence to connect him to the murder that had prompted Ken to call in after seeing the KTVD article. Not yet. But now that we had physical evidence that I'd been in his car, we could get a warrant to search his house, his computer, his online activities, which meant they were finally going to find not just James Carson, but Jimmy Carlson and whoever else he had been over the years. Okay, and also James Carson to Jimmy Carlson isn't even that big of a difference. I thought it was a more of a significant name change. That's insane. Also, all of these chapters are maybe like 4 paragraphs. That's why we're like speeding through this part of the book. We are hitting the climax, right? And so this is all like zoom, 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 zoom. We're getting through it. 34, Sky in Idaho, right? She's in the car with James. The whole ride home, he is just cursing about how stupid his wife is and how he blames April for him getting caught. Suddenly, he grabbed a cell phone that had been lying next to me in the passenger seat. I flinched as his hands fumbled around on the seat. The car radio made a little blip, and I wondered if I had done it. He pulled a folded piece of paper out of his pocket, then dialed the phone number, slamming on the brakes to keep from plowing into the back of his own minivan. I watched April's wide eyes flick to the rearview mirror. I could only imagine what she was thinking right now. Part of me sympathized with her. She was married to a murderer, and she had no idea. Another part of me was angry with her, and still another part hated her, because how could she not know? From what Brescia told me, she'd looked up the article that had run in Utah about the murder that he had committed there. Okay, I thought we already talked about this from Brescia's. So anyway, he calls this phone number. This is Marjorie. It's James, he said flatly. Her suspicion melted into surprise. James, my goodness, I didn't recognize your number. It's wonderful to hear from you. It's been such a long time. I didn't think I'd hear. He didn't match her tone when he cut her off. We need to come stay at the cabin. The radio blipped again as what he said hit me. I missed Marjorie's response as I frantically looked back at the city behind us where the police station and Brescia had long since disappeared from view. He was going to run. I couldn't panic. I had to focus. I had to listen. Marjorie sounded slightly confused, but mostly pleased when she responded. The cabin? Oh, yes. Yeah, wonderful memories there. It's been so long. When do you want to visit? I'll check my calendar. He rolled his eyes. Wonderful memories? He laughed bitterly, but didn't elaborate. April and I need to get out of town. I don't have time to explain, but I need you to keep quiet about it. And this phone call, if anyone asks. Can you do that? I damn well kept quiet all those years. Now it's your turn to return the favor. I'm assuming this is about child abuse stuff that we talked about before, of like whatever traumatic childhood bullshit. I'm assuming it happened at this cabin. Will we learn about it? Maybe. Marjorie finally responded flatly, all right. She didn't sound happy anymore. It's dusty out there, though. Do you remember where we kept the key? I remember. He replied in a clipped voice. It was my cabin before it was yours. Okay, so maybe not. There was a long pause. Then, all right, glad you remember. I remember everything, he spat. As he ended the call, I slipped through the car's air vents and hightailed it back toward the station as fast as I could go. Okay, well, hey, there's the answer. It's through the air vents. Okay, maybe we are maintaining rules. I'm sorry for doubting you. In chapter 35, we're with Megan. She and Detective Demonska have arrived in Idaho, and they're going to the police station to meet up with like Detective Kittleson and start this whole process, right? She goes in there, she sees Brescia, and instantly she like knows that Brescia is a ghost as well. I stared at her in disbelief. She flinched at my gaze as if I might be gearing up to scream at her. Instead, without really thinking about it, I brushed past Kittleson, who was still yammering on about something that didn't sound very important at all, and leaned in to give her a hug. When I did, I learned the answer to every question that had crossed my mind in the past 30 seconds, and every question I might possibly ask in the future about Brescia. As our arms touched and we embraced, I saw with crystal clarity everything she so badly wanted me to know about her own murder, about what she'd tried to do the night I died, and about what she'd done afterward. Everything words couldn't have summed up, no matter how hard we'd tried. When we stepped apart, I could see that the same had happened for her, that she understood what I desperately wanted her to know, too. Where I'd been all this time, what it meant that I knew she'd tried to save me even if it hadn't worked out, everything I wanted to say. And before they can actually have a conversation, before they can figure anything else out, Brescia and I turned at the same time to see a young Latina woman with curly black hair flying down the hall toward us. "He's running," she cried. And from the way she brushed past desks and around doorways, I knew she was dead, too. It is Sky, right? Sky has returned, and she's telling them what's going on. Brescia's point of view in chapter 36, they all get together and they make a run for it to go to James's house. And they're going to beat the police because, right, now that Detective Demonska's here and Kittleson, they're going to get together and they're all going to roll out and, like, serve the arrest warrant or, like, search his house, search warrant, blah, 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 and go and do all of that. So the girls are kind of racing ahead of the cops to follow him in case he is running, right, which he is. So they get there, and James and his family are putting in the final packages or like the final boxes and bags and whatnot into the van to leave. And so the girls are like trying as hard as they can to like will the van to break down or like will some type of like electrical problem so that they can't go anywhere or to communicate with April, like just something, right? They're trying absolutely everything they can. Nothing works. And so his whole family gets in the van. They're leaving. They are fully leaving. And so the women all get into the van as well. They're driving and driving and driving. Eventually the girls fall asleep and April uses this time to talk to James and try to ask what's going on, right? She's like, I just don't understand why we're leaving. Like, if you're innocent, since you're innocent, why can't we just talk to them? Make sure that they understand that you'd never met that girl. Why do we have to? I feel like I'm in The Fugitive right now. She cracked a tentative smile, but it faltered when he didn't smile back. April shook her head. I mean, they gave us the key back. They wouldn't have done that if they'd found something, right? It was impossible to hide the desperation in her voice. He pursed his lips and kept his eyes on the road. That lady detective in Utah has wanted to pin this on me ever since your BFF Nina, he spat out the name like it was a bad word, got so bored with her life that she decided to ruin mine. He cut his eyes toward April, and now yours too. He added a tight-lipped sing-song. And now yours, too. Is that what? Interesting. April clutched the seatbelt with one hand as he braked for a tree branch that had fallen into the one-lane road. We turned off the highway, paved highway a few miles ago and onto a narrow dirt road. April tried again. Did you tell your lawyer that you were leaving town? How long are we going to be staying? If Emma misses more than a few days of kindergarten, I'm going to have to bring a doctor's note or she'll be truant. He glared at the road. Can you shut up, please? April looked like she'd been slapped. She was quiet for a few seconds, and then she softly asked, Is there anything you're not telling me? He ignored her. After a few minutes, she took a deep breath and tried again. The last time Marjorie tried to get in touch after your dad died, you told her that if she ever called the house again that you'd get a restraining order, and you didn't even go to the funeral, and now we're going to stay at her cabin? I've never pushed you to talk about her because I know how you get when her name comes up, but I always wondered if she might have... She trailed off and studied him apprehensively, and finally she whispered, Had something to do with your scars. He stared straight ahead, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Please talk to me, I'm scared. He took one hand off the steering wheel. For a second, I thought he was going to hit her. She must have wondered the same thing because she recoiled against the passengers. He sent her a withering look as if he couldn't believe how dramatic she was being, and then snatched a bottle of water from the cup holder, letting go of the wheel with both hands to open it. Is he going to hurt them? Megan suddenly asked in a small voice from behind me. She had turned away from the window and was watching Kimmy while she slept, fuzzy purple blanket in hand. Brisha slid down from the pile of sleeping bags and squeezed into the space on the other side of Emma's car seat. I don't think so. He brought all their stuff. It was so April would go with him. Megan responded listlessly. He didn't buy me drinks because he wanted me to enjoy them. Oh, what a sentence. Oh my God. She closed her eyes and I noticed the same reflective shimmer I sometimes saw in myself when I looked in the mirror. We shouldn't have come, she whispered. Whatever's going to happen, I don't want to see it. Oh no. Oh. I'm really scared, guys. And then finally they get to chapter 38, Megan's point of view. And she's having a hard time being back in the woods, right? After all this time, she spent all these months and stuff in this city with Detective Demonska, that it's kind of weird being back in the wilderness with this man after he killed her and she spent the time with her body. Like, it's all just a little bit trippy and a little bit weird, right? And as she's like sitting here, she's just like taking everything in, and she's taking in, Brisha and Sky. They all have a little bit of conversations, and Brisha's talking about how like she has given up. So Megan's like, so why didn't you leave, like, for good? Brisha gave me a look. I didn't know that was an option. And Sky is also confused. So they never had those conversations with anybody, right? They had no idea that they could just leave. They thought that they were stuck on Earth. Sky lay down on the carpet of pine needles and closed her eyes. Tell us your magic, Megan. So I told them about the Chala and the memory of Bubby that promised to blossom into a million more memories as soon as I was ready. People I'd never met, places I'd never seen, an expanding universe of connected consciousnesses. I felt a little like a preacher extolling heaven as I watched Brisha's expression shift from disbelief to astonishment. And I know I kind of talked about it yesterday, but I would just like to say I love that idea of the afterlife. Like, I love that idea of just like cascading memories and just going down quite literally memory lane with all these different people and like going down the different rabbit holes of how we're all interconnected. Love that. Also, one of the reasons why I love the short story, The Egg by Andy Weir. Yes, that Andy Weir, the one that wrote Project Hail Mary in The Martian. He wrote a short story called The Egg. You can like just Google it. It's a PDF. Like, it's pretty short on a couple websites and stuff. Very, very good, talking about like what happens after you die. Kind of not really similar to this, but like kind of sort of in a way. That's just, I don't know. I like, I'm just plugging my favorite death stuff whenever I can. Okay, so she goes on. She tells them all of this stuff. I had no idea. She whispered, if I did, I don't think I would have stayed. I almost didn't a few times. The Sky sat up. I don't really know anybody else who's died. I doubt anyone's anxiously waiting to show me around the other side. My grandparents are all still alive. I can't think of anyone. Except maybe my gym teacher from middle school. He died of cancer last summer. I doubt he's all that excited to see me. This is like so sad. So she just doesn't know anybody who's dead. Megan responds and she says, you said you were headed to college at Idaho State, right? Where you didn't know anybody? Sky shrugged. Yeah, maybe it'll be like that. Stop. I reached for her hand and felt her sadness like it was my own. Except you'll be meeting your family, the people who raised your grandparents and the people who raised them all the way back. Even though you don't know them yet, they're going to claim you. She looked thoughtful. I always meant to do one of those 23andMe kits. My mom tried to get into family history once. Just once, after she saw a commercial. She got all excited and wanted to know if we had like Aztec royalty in our blood. It didn't last very long. The line stopped hard at my great-great-grandparents in El Salvador during the Civil War. She closed her eyes and lay back in the pine. Brescia and I lay down beside her. They're going to be so happy to meet you, I said. And when your mom gets there and finds you waiting, I bet you're going to introduce her to royalty after all. Dude, I cannot. Sky smiled. Yeah, I bet you're right. The delicate leaves of hope pushing up through the thick sadness curled back in an instant as James suddenly came barreling out of the house. Where's the black backpack? He barked. I swear to God, if you didn't bring it. Kimmy went silent, and Emma instinctively reached for April's hand. April tilted her head a little and then marched over to the van where she grabbed a big black backpack that had been shoved under the passenger seats. As she had handed it to him, she hissed, "It's right here, and don't you talk to me like that in front of the girls. You're scaring them." She's all bite when it comes to them, Brescia mumbled. Come on, let's see what's in the damn backpack. Ugh. The emotional whiplash, right? Again, parts of this book, phenomenal, right? Obviously, I'm crying constantly as I'm reading this. Yeah, I can see why this got rated so highly. Guys, we don't have that much left. Okay, we have less than 100 pages. 39, Brescia. They are watching as James is going through everything that he had packed in the van. The backpack was loaded with survival tools and wads of cash. The exterior looked familiar, and when I searched my memories, I found it on the top shelf of the hall closet next to a pile of random-looking camping supplies and an enormous bucket packed full of mountain meals. I hadn't paid much attention to it until one of April's church friends, a visiting teacher who was assigned to deliver a monthly inspiring message, brought over a plate of blondies and read a passage about food storage. April had proudly showed her the closet with the backpack, camping supplies, and mountain meals. I'm not perfect at anything else, but I'm pretty damn perfect at emergency preparedness, April had said with a grin. So they were like preppers. Oh no. And they brought all of this stuff so that they can like be locked down in the cabin for a couple of months. Oh. And it's like 6 months of stuff that's packed, right? Like they're going to be able to lock down in this cabin. So the girls watch as everybody kind of goes about their business. And James is just like hot and cold all day and being like super randomly upset. At night, though, he gets even worse. And so the women are like, hey, like what the frick is going on with him? They find out that this whole emergency preparedness thing that they had, it was 6 months. When they did the math and packed it and bought all of this before the girls were born. But now that they have 2 daughters with them, this isn't 6 months of food. This is like maybe 30 days. And they all realize that he's going to kill his wife and daughters to stay hidden. Sky sat down beside her after Megan says yet again, like he's going to kill them. Sky sat down beside her. Maybe, but he hasn't yet, so come on, we're going to talk to April. She grabbed Megan by the hand, and I watched as first surprise, then a flood of other emotions. Compassion, sadness, horror played across her features. Come on, sis, I feel that, and I'm with you. Stay with us, okay? Megan shook her head, but followed Sky to the back bedroom, still holding her hand. So they had a little telepathy talk, I guess, when they touched. That's interesting. Surprise, compassion, sadness, horror played across her features. Okay, that's interesting. And so the women approach April as she's sleeping and try to like whisper in her ear or I guess kind of like yell in her ear about how like you need to find a way to get the girls and like get the hell out of here. You can't wait. You can't wait. You can't wait. And April jolts awake. So this is very, very similar to Sky when she was talking to her mom and then her mom woke up like kind of from a nightmare. Very, very similar vibe here where April is responsive to them talking to her as she's asleep. And so April wakes up very freaked out, goes and checks on the girls, but then she just goes back to bed and they're not really sure like how effective this was. And so for the next couple of days, a little bit as like time passes, every single night they whisper to April and every single time she wakes up panicked, but just kind of ignores what's going on and just like chalks it up to being a nightmare. And she's very obviously not taking this serious about leaving. And James is very, very clearly getting more and more irritable and more impatient until one day he grabs a shovel and stalks off into the woods because he chose a spot about a quarter mile from the cabin along a deer path. The ground was soft and mulchy enough beneath the cover of the pines that it didn't take long for him to complete the first hole to his liking. The three of us stood along the deer path, trying to make it make sense. The hole was about 3 feet wide, 6 feet long, and 3 feet deep. He dug in silence, looking up only when the crackle of twigs from some creature broke through the still night and the soft thunk of a shovel hitting dirt over and over again. We stayed long enough to let the reality of what he was doing sink in, long enough to see that the hole was, unmistakably, a grave, and that he was starting on a second. And then we fled back to the cabin. Because obviously, they need to wake up April. So that's what they do in chapter 42. They begin yelling at her, right? Waking her wasn't the problem. Getting her to listen was, and we were running out of time fast. I had no idea exactly what happened when I spoke to her while she slept. Could she see the images of the shallow graves as I described them urgently in her ear? Could she hear me talking distantly? Did she even remember what had happened when she woke up, or was I just a night terror delivering a shot of pure and nameless adrenaline in the dark? As she awoke with a jolt to an empty bed, I turned to see Sky and Megan hovering behind me. I already knew that these might be our last moments together. Megan wasn't staying, and now that I knew I had a choice, I wouldn't be either. It was too much, and the window to do anything at all was closing. If it came down to it, I couldn't watch. I'd already decided who I was going to find in my memories when the time came. My Aunt Nellie. She'd taken care of me when I was a little girl, and I loved her fiercely. Fresh out of college, she'd moved in with us when I was 5 and took care of me after preschool until she found a real job a year later. We splashed in the kiddie pool at the YMCA, made necklaces out of cereal and macaroni, brushed the manes and tails of my plastic horses, and watched cartoons together. She died in a car crash when I was 6, right after she moved out. And it's just more little, gut punchy moments, you know what I mean? So they wake her up. They keep trying to communicate to her. Eventually, April, when she wakes up, like we said, she realizes that the bed is empty. And so she goes searching around a little bit, trying to find where James is. She stared into the thick bramble of trees surrounding her for a moment. And then, so slowly, I knew she was bracing for what she might see. She looked over at the woodpile. The shovel wasn't there. Distantly, we could all hear the soft thunk, pause, thunk. April walked to the other side of the woodpile, scanning every inch as if she might have missed the bulky shovel the first time. Her face was expressionless, but her fingers were clutching the quilt so hard that the tips glowed faintly white in the darkness against the embroidered pattern. Thunk, pause, thunk, pause, pause, pause. The muffled crack of a twig came from somewhere in the distance. April took a step back toward the open cabin door. Because he's coming. He's back. And so she begins running inside the cabin. The girls all follow her in there, or at least the two of them do. But Brescia stays back to try to attack him or distract him or waste some time or do something to try to buy April some time. So when she gets into the house, the two other women are standing in the hallway waiting, and April is pretending to be asleep, but she didn't have time to grab a knife or anything, so she's just laying in bed pretending. And he just ends up standing in the hallway, really, really creepily for a while, looking at his, stash of survival objects that he has, and just, I don't know, doing some, mental math on everything. Also takes a look at the piles of meals. He hadn't counted them for a couple of days, but the buckets still looked relatively full. Nobody was eating with the vigor they had a few days ago, given the effect on everyone's digestive system. He sighed heavily, then padded down the hallway to April's room. Sky and I followed him, while Megan hung back. Neither of us prodded her to follow. He quietly opened the bedroom door, casting a dim square of light across the bed where April lay on her side, turned away from him. I watched her chest rise and fall, deep breaths like clockwork. If I had to guess, she was counting with each inhale and exhale. He stared at her for a few seconds. Then he carefully shut the door, pulled off his jeans and plaid shirt, and got into bed on the other side. So if he's not going to kill them tonight, he definitely will in the next couple of days. We go into chapter 43. We have 9 chapters left. And so begins the chaos, right? Megan, Brescia, Sky are just watching as James falls asleep and April's next to him. And before sunrise, April wakes up. She can't really run in the middle of the night. It's a little too sketchy, like to go in and wake up the girls, right? The girls are going to make noise. Like it's going to be not a very like conducive thing to run away with these young girls. And so the next morning, very, very early, she wakes up and she goes searching around the cabin trying to find the keys for the van. James catches her and she plays it off. You know, she's like, oh, yeah, I was just making breakfast. You know, I think we probably need to go into town. You know, we need a little bit more supplies. Like, trying to figure out the keys for the van, right? He's playing it off. And he's like, too risky. We can't do that. Okay. And obviously he says it significantly more rude than that. And so she pushes back and she's like, I mean, they're not looking for me. They're looking for you. And I'll park way before town and I'll just walk in. Nobody would see the license plate or anything. And I could wear a hat. And without makeup, I really don't look like myself. And she just wants to go into town, right, to pick up stuff. He cut her off, snatching the coffee maker out of her hand and splashing water down the front of her shirt. And he's just being very like verbally abusive to her. So like, I don't want to read that out loud. Just know that it is happening. And she stared at him in a stunned silence. And I prayed to God he couldn't tell as well as I could that his wife was hearing every word he said with a new filter. No more rationalizing, no more pretending. He was a ticking time bomb about to blow up in her face. And then the girls wake up and there's a click of one of their doors down the hall. And April snapped her mask back into place, grabbing a threadbare towel from above the stove to press against her soaked shirt. You're right, she told him apologetically. I'm sorry, it was a stupid idea. I'll clean all this up and have the girls help me with breakfast. I'm sorry, she repeated, reaching out for his arm again. And then the little girls come running in. Oh. And she's trying to play it off and just like talking to the girls and being cute and stuff. Oh, this hurts so bad. And so after breakfast, April takes the girls outside and she says, you guys, they go into a clearing. They tell him that they're going to look for stuff to build pine cone people to make like little toys for the girls. But when they get far enough away from the cabin, April pulls them and she's like, hey, you guys know how Daddy has always been kind of grumpy and we've all been feeling kind of yucky in our tummies? She held one of her fingers to her lips to cut short any overly loud replies. The girls nodded. Well, you know how I surprised you with hot chocolate this morning? I want us to surprise Daddy again. Everyone leaned closer to April, dying to know the plan. Well, we're going to have to find a whole bunch of berries to bring back to Daddy for dinner. Emma looked skeptical. Berries? Kimmy, on the other hand, was gleeful. Nobody had eaten anything fresh for way too long now. Oh, Mommy, good idea, she whispered. Where are they? They're really far, and we have to be really quiet so we don't give away the surprise. Oh. And so obviously the three women are watching and they're like, yeah, you go, girl. They're like cheering her on. We don't want Daddy to see us leave or he'll know that we're up to something, April told the girls, showing them how to duck down slightly beneath the brush level along the deer path. Her smile was looking manic to me, but the girls didn't seem to notice. Step quietly until we're a little farther away, okay? We won't have to be quiet anymore after a bit. The girls followed her directions exactly, and the three started moving down the deer path, with Sky and me right behind. Brescia stayed where she was, in view of the cabin. I'll catch up with you, okay? I know it won't change anything, but I need to know how far behind he is. I'll head downhill until I find you when he realizes something is up. April was walking the opposite way from the three graves, waiting with open mouths farther up the trail. I was glad she wouldn't see them. I knew what it felt like to look at your own grave. And the farther she moved away from them, the better her chances of not ending up in one. And she's like going through her memory of like driving down this road, and they must be 5, 10, 20 miles away from like the nearest like big major road. I felt the flicker of hope start to fade. With two little girls in tow, even my most optimistic estimate was impossibly far. Megan and Sky, right? They're like going through their memories, trying to figure out when they last looked at the clock. And they're trying to do math of like, okay, well, if he was going the speed limit and we went this far and it was this many minutes between when you and I turned and did stuff, we can figure out how far away it is. And so they try to do all of this math. And again, it's not like any of it really matters. It's so far away to have two little girls walking. Time passes, and then they hear the distinct sound of tires on the dirt road somewhere through the trees. I'd wondered how close we might be to the road we'd driven in on, but April didn't seem to be in a hurry to find it. Not yet. So they're just going in the road. So she's kind of parallel to the road, right? Like April's able to at least kind of keep an eye on it. and not get lost in the woods, but they're trying to stay off of it enough to not get seen, right? Makes sense. They hadn't even brought water with them or jackets. It was pleasant enough outside right now, but it wouldn't be nice once night fell. I remembered every detail of that first night I'd spent alone in the mountains. The glowing eyes, the coyotes, the sounds of twigs snapping in the darkness, the feeling that I was completely and utterly alone, and I'd been dead. Nothing could touch me anymore. I kept my eyes on the sun too, willing it to stay high in the sky, willing them onward. And so there's a point where April turns to her girls and she says, I need you to do something for me, and we don't have time to be scared because that will slow us down, okay? There's a bear behind us, so we need to run as quickly and quietly as we can, okay? Instinctively, Sky moved beside Kimmy while Brisha stepped next to Emma. Listen to your mama, Brisha told her, and Sky murmured the same words. To their credit, neither little girl stopped to cry or ask questions. They knew about bears from the songs they sometimes sang while they played with the Pinecone people and the stories April told them in their beds. So if April said run, they would run. And then obviously Brisha's caught up to them because he did find out that something was wrong and he hopped in the car to track them down, right? So now Brisha's with all the women. I was honestly impressed by how quickly the girls moved after that. Oh, they're doing so good and they're running through the woods. And so obviously she's stopping every now and then or like slowing down to encourage the girls of like, okay, it's okay, guys. Like, we're outrunning him. You're doing so good, girls, but we have to keep going, okay? Like, we can take a break for a second, but then we got to keep going. And then Sky, she kept going to see how close we are to town, and it's not far at all, maybe another 5 miles along the road. She's a white lady with kids. Someone will stop and give them a ride. She'll flag someone down, right? And then call the police, which is all good and great until they hear a car pull up on the road and stop, and it's James. And April had heard this or heard something indicative, and so she had laid down and had the girls like lay down with her. And so Brisha, I went out to meet him while Megan and Sky stayed with April and the girls. When I glanced back over my shoulder, the only person I could see was Megan, her arms wrapped around her stomach as she watched me go. The others were completely hidden from this vantage, next to the toppled tree trunk that butted up to a couple of mossy boulders. He was coming from the direction of the road. When I caught sight of him, I could still see the minivan perched precariously along the narrow dirt shoulder at the top of the steep graded slope. In our scramble through the woods, we'd moved closer to the road than I had thought. Oblivious to the noise he was making, James growled as his shirt caught on a dead tree branch, ripping part of it. His eyes scanned the diverging deer paths in front of him, looking for any sign of April or the girls. As he crashed toward me, I could see that he was clutching something in his hand. It was the multi-tool from the survival kit. Half axe blade, half hammer. There was no more pretense. The jig was up. There was no trace of the collected, methodical planning of this person moving toward me. His hair, sweaty against his forehead, was matted and wild, his eyes hard and full of rage. There were no more games to be played or time to bide. April had betrayed him. She'd run away before he was ready to finish her off, and he was going to kill all three of them as soon as he had found them. I didn't know what he was thinking at this moment, and I didn't want to, but I could feel the desperation and rage coming off of him in thick waves through the air between us as he passed me, whipping his head from side to side and scrutinizing the terrain. That desperation was the only comfort I could find. He'd been up and down this dirt road in that damn minivan all these hours without success. Maybe, just maybe, he'd turn around and drive a little farther when he didn't find them near the road. But he barreled forward, letting out another grunt of rage. I followed him, powerless as ever to do anything to stop him if he had found them. He gets very, very close to their hiding spot, but they continue to like speak in his ear, right? Brisha, Sky, and Megan start speaking to him about like, you're looking in the wrong place. You're nowhere near them. They're the other direction. And like kind of will him to start feeling this way, right? And so eventually he gets like super, super pissy and turns and goes back up to the van. And when he drives away, April and the girls get up. And so April waited until she heard the distant sound of the engine turning over and the whisper of the tires on the dirt road until she released her grip on the girls and shakily stood up, turning her tear-filled eyes toward her two terrified babies. The bear is gone, Kimmy whimpered. It sounded like he was saying words, Emma managed in a tremulous voice, looking at April with the widest hazel eyes I had ever seen. April blinked back tears and grabbed their hands. What matters is that he went away and that we're almost safe. You're both so brave, brave girls. Can you run with me one more time?" And then they nodded, and then they go running. There was a new steely determination in the air. Megan wasn't hugging herself anymore. In fact, she looked like she just caught fire. From the half smile on Brisha's face, she could feel it too. The scales were tipping. They hadn't landed yet, but they were tipping with a little pressure from invisible hands. Oh. And so they keep going. As we approached the turnoff to Highway 55, the sun was just dipping beneath the ridge to the west, ascending the valley into some sort of murky pre-sunset gloom. April had been carrying Kimmy for the past few minutes. Emma was holding on to the back of April's shirt, stumbling forward on sheer adrenaline. All three of them were ready to crash. But they made it, right? They made it to the main road. They're here. But there's danger in walking along the road still, right? Even though we're on a main drag, even though we're on like a main like highway, it could be James, right? So they stay off to the side, and the plan is to just keep walking into town. And they keep going, and finally, they see city lights. And not only that, but there is the Big Cat Mountain Lodge was lit up in neon, advertising the best prime rib in Idaho on its glowing letterboard. Beyond it, through thick pines, there were more speckled lights promising civilization farther down the highway, but the rustic bar and grill, blazing with light and surrounded by a few vehicles, was the closest by a long shot. And so they get up there. She scans the parking lot. She doesn't see the van. And so they're good, right? She's just going to go inside the bar. They're going to get help. Everything is going to be great. James is clearly not here. Everybody's excited, right? Megan, Brisha, Sky, cheering. So amped up that this worked. April steps into the bar and stops in her tracks because just a few yards away, sitting at the bar, was James. Luckily, April was able to see him, grab the girls, turn the corner before he spotted them. He's sitting at the end of the bar. His body is like face toward the door. Like he was waiting for them to get here. He, I guess, had given up on going up and down the road and knew that this was the closest bit of civilization. So this is where they would end up, right? So he was at the bar drinking and just waiting for them. But in the split second that April came in, clocked it, and like dove to the restaurant part of the building, he was like arguing with the bartender about something. So it was just this like split second, perfect timing. He doesn't see them as they go into the restaurant, but he does look back fast enough to see the door still swinging. That's kind of weird. So he gets up to go and try to look for them, and he like peeks his head around the corner into the restaurant area. And luckily he looks like right at the same time that the girls have gone into the bathroom and shut and locked the door. So he does not know that they're here. He didn't see them. They're safe, right? They're just hiding here. And so with them locked in the bathroom, him in the bar watching, there's no exits. Like you're going to have to go back through the restaurant to get out of here, right? We were trapped. Again, I wasn't sure what he was prepared to do in a public setting if he caught sight of her. Did he have a weapon on him tucked inside that big-ass coat? Would he pull April and the girls out the door into the night, playing the crazy wife card? He'd been backed into a corner so far that he'd been willing to take the risk in leaving the cabin. He wasn't going to leave without them, no matter what it took. I knew what he was capable of, but nobody else in this sleepy bar and grill did. Sure, he might attract some attention and concern. He might have to turn on the charm to excuse the domestic kerfuffle. Would anyone see through it? Would anyone try to stop him? I wanted to believe that the young couple at the bar would call the police, that the gruff bartender with the salt and pepper whiskers would tackle him to the ground the moment he grabbed April's arm. Would the camo-clad hunters gathered around the table in the back reach for the backpack on the floor that just maybe contained some type of weapon? I already knew it wouldn't happen like that. The girls were afraid of a bear, not their dad. As soon as they saw him, they would rush to him in relief, throwing their little arms around his waist, cowering away from April as she screamed for them to stop. I could already imagine the customers' anxious looks of concern fading as James disappeared out the door with all three of them into the parking lot, apologizing for April's seemingly insane behavior while the girls clung to him in fear, and April thrashed. The bartender and the young couple and the hunters would exchange worry. I hate that word, by the way, W-A-R-Y. Weary looks that said, "What the hell was that?" and then hesitantly turned back to their beer or their burger. Later, when they were interviewed for the news, they'd say, "I knew something was off about him." For now, though, they would give him the benefit of the doubt. The burden of proof was high to get involved with a stranger's business. I probably wouldn't have done anything different if I were still alive. Oh my God. So in chapter 50, April locked the deadbolt to the entire bathroom and then pulled the girls into the large disability stall at the far end of the room. The dull exhaustion was gone, replaced with a frantic, wild-eyed desperation. The girls were looking at her in confusion. To them, this day had been one nonsensical, grueling tour de force that had ended in being rushed into the bathroom. "Mommy, why are we all in here together? I need a drink of water. I'm hungry." Oh. Sky slipped through the crack in the bathroom door, saying, "I'm positive he didn't see them. He's just sitting there watching the door," like the door to get into the restaurant, not the bathroom door. When someone knocked on the door a few seconds later, April winced and shook her head, tears pooling in the corners of her eyes. It was a woman's voice. "Everything okay in there?" April hesitated, her eyes still darting wildly across the mirrors and around the room. Hold on, okay? One sec." There was a corkboard near the mirrors, covered in advertisements for a local fireworks show, dog walking, boat rentals, ATV sales, babysitters, the usual small-town debris. Some of it was water-stained, as if it had been used to dry somebody's hands in a pinch when the paper towels ran out. "Why doesn't she just let them in, ask them to call the police?" Brisha asked in frustration. Sky shook her head. "I don't think it's that simple. What if he walks back here and sees that lady calling the police and standing in the bathroom door? He's not stupid." Brisha considered this as April stepped to the side of the mirror, scrutinizing the corkboard up close. The sound of tinkling was steady in the background. "Okay, but if she keeps the door locked, it's going to cause a scene when that lady goes back. Can't she just pull her in here and then lock the door? She'll have a phone, right?" I frowned. "What if she screams? She doesn't know anything. I'd scream if somebody yanked me into a bathroom and locked the door. He'll hear it." As we argued, I watched as the panic in April's eyes turned steely. She looked away from the corkboard and quickly strode to the bathroom door, unlocking it and then opening it just a crack to reveal an older woman on the other side. I studied the spot on the corkboard where April had been looking and gasped. Brisha and Sky saw the same water-stained paper sign at the same time I did. "On a date that isn't going well, ask for Andrea at the bar and we'll make sure you get home safe." I didn't say it earlier. It got referenced one time in the very beginning when Megan was at the bar on their first date and she had gone in there and had seen that same flyer on one of the bathroom stalls. And she was like, "Oh my God, I'm so glad I don't need that. That's so cool. This bar has that as an option, but thank goodness I don't need it." And then now it comes back and it's like a full circle. Ask for Andrea. The name of the book, guys. I could feel Sky and Brisha's eyes on me. They knew where I had seen the sign before because I had shown them the memory that night at Gracie's. The fluorescent bulb in the bathroom flickered as April smiled tremulously and beckoned to the woman, her eyes darting around the strip of bar that the doorway revealed. I looked at the woman hesitating outside the door. She appeared to be in her mid-40s. Her box red hair was swept up in a messy ponytail, and she was wearing an oversized black Idaho State University sweatshirt with gray sweatpants. She peered over to study April, who had backed behind the door, mostly out of sight. "Please, can you help me? It's really important. Just tell the bartender that Andrea is needed in the bathroom. Please just say that, nothing else, okay? You don't have to do anything else." April's eyes moved back and forth across the woman's face, waiting for her to react, waiting for the puzzled look on the woman's face to harden into skepticism, waiting for her to slowly back away and loudly tell a waiter that there was some crazy woman in the bathroom. The woman in the Idaho State sweatshirt looked between Kimmy and Emma, who looked like they'd been rolled down a mountain, and basically they had. April looked wild and crazy too. The whole situation screamed that something was very wrong, and I assumed the lady had to use the bathroom on top of parsing out what was going on here. She slowly nodded and backed away. "Okay, hon, hang on." "Thank you," April whispered, and then shut and relocked the door. It was only a minute or two before we heard a soft knock on the door. Even though April had been listening at the hinge, waiting for it, she still tensed, her eyes moving to the door handle. Kimmy and Emma had stopped asking questions and were scooping handfuls of water out of the bathroom sink into their mouths. It was a young woman's voice. "Andrea, are you there?" As she said the words and April cracked the door open to let her in, I looked at Sky and Brisha in triumph. If I could have cried, I definitely would have. The waitress couldn't have been more than 18 years old, about the same age as Skye, but while April whispered the critical parts of her story, trying to keep Kimmy and Emma from hearing, she listened with a seriousness and knowing that told me she had seen some things too. And so she listens, she leaves the bathroom, and immediately goes to the back of the kitchen, goes to her purse, and calls 911. This is so sad. This is actually, like, really good. Jesus Christ. When the red and blue flashing lights appeared through the windows of the bar and grill, James stayed composed. He didn't stand up. He didn't crane his neck to look at the police officers as they walked through the dark parking lot and through the front door of the restaurant. Even when he saw that they were walking toward him, he didn't react. I guess maybe he still thought there was a chance that they hadn't come for him, that they were here for someone else. After all, chances were slim that someone in this podunk town had recognized him or had seen the minivan, wherever he stashed it. James Carson, you're under the arrest for the murder of Megan Campbell, the officer told him. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. I felt Brescia and Skye slide next to me, wrapping their arms through mine as he was perp-walked to the door. The decorative string of Edison lights above the bar glowed brighter. The bar, which had moments earlier been filled with a low rumble of voices and clatter, had suddenly gone still enough that the rustle of the officers and their footsteps across the wood floor were the only sounds for a few seconds. The hunters smirked at him in pity and amusement. The young couple at the bar stared at him in horror. The waitress who had called the police watched in grim satisfaction from the back of the restaurant near the kitchen. James clamped his mouth shut, whipping his head around as the officers led him outside, searching the night in vain for April, who was still safely locked in the bathroom. I felt something in me unclench, as if I had been holding my breath for a very, very long time. I didn't feel like jumping up and down or screaming for joy. It wasn't that kind of happy. The only way I can describe it is the way I felt when I told Bubby goodbye at her bedside when she died. Relieved that I had made it in time. Grateful I was in that room at that moment with people I loved. And devastated about nearly everything else. Oh my God. Okay. I have 2 more chapters. Brescia. Oh, wait, how many pages do I have? I wish I could just read all of this out loud to you. Oh, I can't. Oh my God, this is only like 4 pages. Oh, okay, screw this. I'm reading it out loud and we're doing a live reaction, okay? We're gonna experience these last 2 chapters together in full. I'm so excited. I'm so scared. I'm so scared. I mean, it's good. We're good. Right now we get the happy ending. Now it'll be good stuff. And I get to cry more because I'm sure they're gonna move on with their families. Chapter 51, Brescia. I watched as Emma helped Kimmy squirt a line of ketchup and mustard onto her hot dog at the empty bar. Impossibly, both girls were smiling again. They still didn't know anything about their dad. Still didn't know that he was the real monster that they had been running from all day, who had forced them through the forest and night and into a dirty bathroom stall just to escape becoming victims of the same violence he'd been committing right under their noses for their entire lives. Someday April would have to tell them. There was no getting around it, but I suspected I wouldn't be there for that conversation. And as I looked at Kimmy and Emma's little faces and downy hair, I was glad. I didn't want to see their hearts shatter. It was difficult enough to see April in the staff room as she sat with the police, her eyes red and her whole body shaking. The police were taking her initial statement in the staff room of the bar and grill while they waited for Detective Demonska, who was driving from Boise, to arrive on the scene. The statewide manhunt was over, and James was being booked in the county jail. They told April that they had gotten a search warrant for her and James's entire house, including computer, social media accounts, and his phone records. The puzzle pieces were coming together. If they hadn't already, they would find matchstrike.com, which meant if they dug deep enough through the aliases and ghost accounts, they would find my name in his inbox too. I could tell that the officers questioning April were hoping to learn just how much she knew. They wondered, like I had in the beginning, whether she was naive, stupid, or both. Whether in the worst-case scenario, she might have been an accomplice. But April just cried, apologizing for what she knew too late, apologizing for what she'd suspected but denied even to herself. She told the officers about Nina and the text messages that she had gotten in Utah. She admitted to looking up Megan's name after Demonska called. She cried harder when Demonska asked about Skye. As more officers arrived and the waitstaff was questioned and released, we learned that the mysterious Marjorie had been located in Caldwell, Idaho, where she had been arrested for helping James elude authorities. As April fumbled through the sequence of events that had led to the cabin escape, she told the police that Marjorie was James's stepmother. James's mother had died when he was 6, and his father had remarried Marjorie the same year. They divorced by the time James was 10. He'd hinted at, but never directly admitted, that the constellation of faint scars on his arms, back, and legs, anywhere a t-shirt or shorts would hide, came from her. Marjorie had tried calling the house in the early years of their marriage, asking to meet April and the girls, but James had made it clear that he had no desire to see her again until he called about the cabin. When Demonska arrived in Cascade, she drove April and the girls, and me and Sky and Megan, to a nearby motel for the night. It was nearly 11 at night by that point. April wasn't under arrest, and the girls were falling asleep at the bar. When they got to the little log cabin motel, Demonska led a sleepy Emma by hand while April carried Kimmy in her arms. Sky and I stayed as April climbed into the king bed next to the girls, not bothering to undress. Megan followed Demonska down the hall to her room. "She won't leave without saying goodbye, will she?" Sky asked me quietly as April turned off the bedside lamp, blanketing the room in velvety darkness. The sadness in her voice settled over me, cold and heavy like fog. I knew that of the three of us, Sky was the least interested in moving on. She wasn't sure what was waiting for her or how to get there. Not like Megan with her grandmother. And even though I hadn't yet allowed myself to drift in the same way, I was ready to find my Aunt Nellie, to tell her how much she had meant to me when I was a little girl, and to learn who she was on a deeper level than macaroni necklaces and playdates. The idea of finding her again filled me with a warm glow. I was ready to move toward that light. "She'll be back," I assured Sky, my own relief and hope filtering through the dewy mist of her sadness like sunlight. When Megan slipped into the dark room an hour later, she came bearing case developments from the past week. Ken, Sky's manager at the Daily Grind, had picked James out of a photo lineup, the one who had sometimes flirted with her at the counter. But the video that showed James's license plate in the parking lot didn't show Sky getting into his car, and the Froyo's shop security footage that did show her getting into the vehicle didn't show James's face. Okay, we already knew that. That's not a development. When Demonska called Kittleson, who was in bed back in Boise, he made it clear that unless there was some evidence beyond circumstantial evidence they already had to connect him to Sky's murder, the DA was not planning to move forward with charges at this time. The car had been clean. They already had him for Megan's murder in Utah, and they'd learned that he'd met Megan and plenty of other women on a site called Matchstrike.com. When Megan told me that Demonska had said my name, the Brescia Collier cold case, I felt a shiver of electricity run through me. A detective from Colorado was on his way to Idaho. My parents and sister would finally learn what happened to me. Maybe other women he'd crossed paths with through the app would come forward. Nicole, Elle, they would find answers too. I knew it wasn't over exactly. For so many people, the heartache and the horror were just ramping up. However, I knew that my role in this story was finally over, and I was ready to move forward without James Carson. Then I felt Sky next to me, her sadness curdling into despair. In an instant, the relief I'd felt curdled too. The answers her family needed seemed to be right there for the taking. They knew who had killed their baby, but the way things were headed, Sky's name wouldn't be heard in his trial. They wouldn't find her name on Matchstrike.com. Her case was to go cold. I pictured Sky's mother, the one she had shown us in her memories. The lithe, dark-haired woman with the same curls and golden brown skin. I imagined her watching the news coverage of the grieving families connected to the Matchstrike case, reading details and article after article as lawyers battled to put him behind bars for 2 murders, not 3. Knowing her daughter had been allowed to slip through the cracks because it was too difficult to prove, despite the seemingly smoking gun. Sky's despair hardened into resignation as she turned away to look at April, who was finally breathing softly and deeply in sleep. "It's okay. I knew this might happen." She closed her eyes and added in a low, "I can't read this. This is so hard." "It's okay. I knew this might happen." She closed her eyes and added in a low voice, "I still mattered." Megan frowned. "You still do." She looked thoughtful, turning her face toward the slivers of moonlight at the corners of the motel blinds. Maybe there's something they missed. Maybe they'll still be able to charge him for what they did to you. Skye snorted. Kittleson probably missed a shitload. He was ready to move on before they even found me. Megan scooted next to her, reaching out her hands for both Skye and me. Then let's look together and see what he missed. And so they spend the rest of the night sifting through Skye's memories. We watched every painful detail of James flirting with her at the daily grind, every excruciating moment as shy, hesitant Skye got into his car in the parking lot after work that day, every unspeakable moment that came afterward. We could only see what she saw, remember what she remembered, of course, but as we watched Skye's memory from the coffee shop, the last time he'd come in, I suddenly yelped. The disposable coffee cup he was holding in his hands, the one with the little smiley face and the eyelashes and the words James and hot chocolate in loopy letters. I had seen it before in my own memories, at his house. He'd shoved it into the desk drawer. I let go of Skye and Megan, frantic to tell them, Skye, he was holding a coffee cup. Was he holding a coffee cup in any of the security footage? Skye shook her head. I don't know. I haven't seen all of it, just the parts my mom watched over and over. I know he's on camera, though, from when he was in the coffee shop that morning. I grabbed her hand and showed her the memory of the coffee cup in his desk drawer. There was no way to know whether it was still there or not. Even if it was, would the detectives executing the search warrant know what they were looking at? We have to tell Damonska, Megan insisted, already moving toward the motel door. She'll listen. And we go into our final chapter of the book. From Skye's perspective. I just knew Damonska wouldn't find the coffee cup where Brisha remembered. Who knew if it was still there anyway? I couldn't imagine him keeping something like that lying around. While we whispered through the detective's dreams that night, I prepared myself to be disappointed. My murder would remain unsolved. Lots of murders did. I stayed dead either way, of course, so what did it matter? But it was harder to lie to yourself without the distractions I'd had while I was alive. No phone, no TV, just my own thoughts and the prickles of disappointment that crawled across my body as I stared at the detective who had fought so hard for Megan while she slept. She won't find it, I told Megan and Brisha matter-of-factly. They didn't correct me, but they didn't stop whispering either. I knew she wouldn't find it, right up until the moment she did. It wasn't tucked into the desk drawer anymore. In fact, it was at the bottom of the recycling bin in the garage, hidden underneath Amazon boxes and food packaging, set to be picked up earlier in the week if he hadn't taken April and the girls and run. Damonska found it on the daily grind security footage, a still frame of James holding the cup as he walked outside on the morning he'd murdered me, before she'd found the cup herself. From the way she lingered on the still frame, zooming in until the little smiley face I'd drawn on the cup, right down to the eyelashes, was visible, I knew she'd listened. My mom cried when she learned Detective Andrews, who had been replacing Detective Kittleson on all cases for the foreseeable future, told her that my murder would be added to the charges against the magistrate killer. All of us, Brisha, Megan, and I, were there when he told her. We'd been staying with my mom instead of April or Damonska. I'd hoped the best for April and the girls, but I didn't quite feel the same way about them as Brisha did. I was glad we'd helped her, of course, but I didn't want to see her horror or her tears as she learned the details of what her husband had done. I didn't blame her for what he'd done. However, I was pretty sure I'd still be alive if she'd looked at her husband just a little bit harder instead of looking away. We visited James, who was being held without bond on these murder charges, in jail. It was my idea. I wanted to say a proper goodbye. All of us did. He looked truly pathetic. His beard had already begun its descent into a nasty bird's nest, and he was wearing a dirty orange jumpsuit that was too short at the ankles. Confined to a tiny cell with a rangy giant of a man coming down off meth while awaiting a possible death sentence, he was finally as fearful and powerless as he deserved to be. We spent a full 3 days with him. Each time he fell asleep, we drew close and composed our magnum opus of nightmares. April telling the police everything she knew, the steel in her eyes when she told a reporter that the death penalty did not seem excessive. Women contacting the news in Idaho, in Utah, and Colorado to say that they too had brushed paths with him. Elle's eyes flashing as she talked about what he'd done to her and how disgusting he actually was. Nicole's relieved, mirthless laughter as she shared the text she'd sent to a friend to get out of her date, leaving him alone in the restaurant with the bill. Marjorie selling her side of the story to a tabloid, My Stepson, the Serial Killer. His coworkers from Colorado and Utah and Idaho telling the press that he wasn't nearly as smart as he pretended to be. The nightmares had exactly the desired effect. He awoke screaming and panting after a few minutes every time, babbling about bitches and lies. He started trying to stay awake just to avoid the nightmares he knew were waiting for him any time he drifted off. It made him increasingly touchy, mean, and delirious as the days wore on. His cellmate, the meth head, didn't appreciate any of this. On day 3, at 2 a.m, meth head had finally had enough. As James awoke with a panicked, pathetic howl, he threw off his bedding onto the lower bunk and hauled James off the top bunk in one swift motion. James hit the floor with a sick thud and scrambled to the corner of the cell, darting his eyes around and trying to orient himself to what was happening. He favored his right arm, which hung at an odd angle. Meth head advanced. James screamed for help. The lights in the jail stayed off. As his frantic screams echoed through the cell block, the 3 of us walked down the hallway and into the moonlight beyond the barbed wire and bars. We didn't look back. He'd taken enough from us in life and in death, too. There was no pleasure to be found in whatever happened next. Only justice. We stayed with my mom for a week after that, soaking in the sunlight of the little kitchen and the home that, unlike the police station or the cabin, felt like a safe haven. I didn't linger on goodbyes, and neither did Megan nor Brescia talked about making their way to Colorado and Utah to see their parents one more time. Knowing there would be reunions with our loved ones in the future made those final farewells less dire. The 3 of us spent those last moments searching my memories for a link, looking for someone who would welcome me into the matrix that held my grandparents and great-grandparents and everyone who had come before them. We finally found it in El Salvador. Okay, pause. I'm so sorry to take us out of this moment right now, but we said that her grandparents were already alive. Who would welcome me into the matrix that held my grandparents and great-grandparents? Okay, I thought you said the whole issue was that your grandparents were still alive. Did I imagine that? We finally found it in El Salvador. I'd only been there once when I was just a baby. We'd visited my mom's sister and her 2 daughters, Rocio and Erica. Both were close to my age and still very much alive. But on that short trip, we'd met dozens of others, some friends and some relatives. As I replayed the memories from that trip to San Salvador for Brescia and Megan, I saw introductions to second cousins and half-brothers and one great aunt. I felt silly as I called out to people on my memories as they greeted my mom with big hugs and reached for my rosy cheeks. What was I supposed to say? Hello? Are you dead too? The memories stayed the same until my chubby 1-year-old self was hoisted into the arms of my great aunt Marcia. Can you hear me? I asked her softly as I watched my baby hands grab at her graying hair. As I said the words, I instantly felt the memory change. Megan and Brescia suddenly faded away, and I knew that Marcia was looking right at me when her eyes opened wide in surprise and she said my name. Not Sky, the Anglo-sounding name I'd insisted on when I got to middle school, but my birth name, Estella. Stars in the sky. Mija, Estelita, ¿cómo puedo ser? Go. I heard distantly from the edges of my memory, and for just a moment I lingered in the feeling of being loved from so many different places and time. I imagined Megan finally wrapping herself into the memory of her grandmother. Stop. I imagined Megan finally wrapping herself into the memory of her grandmother like a warm blanket. I thought of Brescia and her Aunt Nellie, and then I let myself be folded into the memory, into the arms that were waiting for me. The only thing, there's like an immediate note from the author that says, if you enjoyed this book, a positive review would mean the world to me. Like other authors, I rely heavily on word of mouth recommendations to reach new readers. I can promise you I read every single review because each one is a new window into this story, and because if you loved this book, you're the one I wrote it for, which is why I'm placing this note before the acknowledgments, and you can leave a review right here. One last thing, if you want to know what happened to April, you can snag a free short story on my website at noelely.com/bonus. Okay. I really liked this book. I got really, really scared. I got really, really scared when I stopped recording last night that this was going to go bad. I still stand by the fact that Noelle needed a better editor. I think that would have been like a game changer for this book. Like I said, I don't know if somebody just didn't edit or if it just like wasn't a very good one, or if this was like a self-published that got picked up and maybe didn't get like re-looked at or something. Like it was good overall. It just like there was some tweaks and stuff that could have just been better, but I don't think that was necessarily like Noelle's fault, especially if this was only her second book that she came out with. I believe I had looked that up and that was the case. And oh man, yeah, I would read more from this author. Holy shit. I think that was really good. I love justice. I love stories about death. I love revenge, and I love justice, and I love things working out, and girl bossing, and like looking out for each other. This had all the makings of a good book, and boy freaking howdy did it do it, you know? This was good. I think in terms of all of the like thrillers and mystery books that we've read for this freaking series, I think this is the best one. Okay, I'm gonna go and think about how wonderful of an afterlife that would be. To die and to go and hang out with like my grandma, my best friend again. I got some really, really cool people waiting for me on the other side. Like, I got some really cool people, if that's the setup, that I get to go and hang out and be in their memories and stuff. Like, that's so cool. What a cool way to think about things, right? What a cool, positive way to think about your current life ending, is to just live the memories of all the people who have ever, like, loved you and loved them and got them to that point, and just, like, this endless memory thing. I think that's so fucking cool. So I'm gonna go think about that, and I'm gonna go cry a lot and look up more books from this author. This was really, really good, actually. Okay, that's all I have. Thanks for crying with me. Surprise! Bet you weren't expecting that on one of these videos. Okay, I love you so much. Like I said, I'm so incredibly grateful for every single one of you. Thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!